you get your plumbing straightened out?
We're not having it septically pumped, and nobody's have to monitoring it for 24 hours. So we're almost at 100% again. Just waiting on a pump. There's been nothing fun about this season at all. It's been.
But you know what? It'll make November and December so nice.
It really, well, I December and January now. That's our really only dead time. December and January. Even November, I'm busy for at least 2 weeks in November, and then Yeah.
Hey, bud.
That's what I do. That's what I focus on.
How you been?
I'm hanging in there.
Are you?
Just surviving.
Is it okay?
It's something else. It's just
You must be smothered.
Smothered's an understatement. I made.
What?
I don't know.
Is it finding help?
Okay, I'm
Well,
gonna
helps-
sit. I
helps
don't
tonight.
like it. It feels like a bumblebee is gonna
It's not gonna get
fly
better.
in my
business that
mouth.
needs employees. What's
Rah!
it's
Okay,
and it's
I'll
not
do my
an issue
best.
of pay. It's an issue of bodies.
Do
Yes.
We don't have enough to go around.
They gotta have a place to live.
Yep. This is our reality. And so,
And with all these new ones coming online,
it's
Oh,
I don't know how you're gonna do
they're
it.
not.
Well,
There's all kinds of.
They're gonna have to build some
They're
places
not.
for them to
I mean,
live.
I have housing for J1 employees, and we're trying to look at creating housing for our long-term staff.
hassle for these parents
And
from the human rights campaign.
That is a challenge in and of itself within our community, because
Well, yes, but
nobody wants what's affordable.
I don't like them.
Even the city doesn't want, the county doesn't want trailer parks. The city doesn't want trailer parks.
parks are good alternatives.
I think it's a great
I do
alternative,
too.
Bob. I do. Especially, I could take you in
I have a lovely.
and I can show you a trailer brand new.
Well,
They don't
now-
build them like we think. You know, because I manage those old trailer parks on Walnut Lane. and
Modular. They're modular, right?
They're modular homes built with six floors. They're 2x6.
Didn't your dad do some of that stuff?
Yeah, we did them just down, and that's the ones our company just bought. He bought those houses. They're
Across from Tom Tom?
Yeah, and we just bought it. I'm running those too. Well, I'm working on it. We're getting there. It's not pretty, but
So Jeremy, it's accurate that it's gonna become a nightmare.
it's bad
It's
now.
done the fall.
Well, I
Right,
make
right.
With
She will.
restaurants,
She will. That's how lawyers do it.
you don't think you know.
this year. I came to that conclusion this year that
I'll send you an email.
what are we saying?
He'll be fine with
We
that.
know our prices are super.
It's just, it's got all kinds of, 90% of it doesn't apply.
Go, Dad.
So
Go,
the
Dad.
more we do that,
Go, Dad. Well, go, Dad.
what are people gonna do? What are you gonna do? You go somewhere, you have a negative experience with the service, and you pay a lot of money. Do you go back?
That's why I've been talking to them about what's happening in Arches and all that. The visitors after a while are gonna go, don't go there.
We're down. If you ask the travel council right now, they'll tell you that we're down. We were running 72% for this for April last week. We're 65%. That's not just the events. Yeah, that's it. The market balance. But you have it's so price competitive. The thing that we can't replace is the commodity of stuff. We can't replace it. You can't.
Robots.
I bring in J1 students. I mean, hey, I bring in J1 students, and they're fantastic. And I pay them just like a family and
And treat them well.
and I treat them really well. But
They're from all over the world, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of Lithuanian, Slovakian, but they're
Eastern Europe nowadays.
kids from Eastern
I
Europe.
love them, they have great accents.
They just like their parents were all black and so good Russian, so their grandparents were all school.
All right. We'll call to order. The time is 12:03. Call to order the Grand County Change in Form of Government Study Committee for today is Friday, June 21st, 2019. In attendance, we have all members with the exception of Ms. Green, who's going to be on her way momentarily. We'd like to start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Dabney, would you lead us in that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll turn our time now over to the approval of the minutes. We're going to review essentially the minutes of the open houses that we've had.
Sorry, I stopped to make coffee.
No, perfectly fine. So for the minutes, we just essentially did a small recording, or not a small recording, the recording of the entire meetings. Those are essentially the minutes. So does anyone have any changes to those recordings?
I move we approve the one from the 13th.
We've got
Second,
a motion to approve by Walt.
These are the minutes on the 14th?
13th, this is the one
13th.
from, this is 13th.
The third,
One from our meeting at the Grand Center.
yep, the Grand Center, the Casa Valley, and then our regular meeting minutes.
Okay.
And the open house minutes are just a recording, and then we actually did have the standard minutes for the 14th. Mr. Dabney?
I'm sorry, we
Only
do have
thing-
minutes also, we do also have minutes for the open house. They're in your package.
No big deal, but on page 4 where it's talking about.
well, we're on the 13th still, Walt.
Where is it?
It's the first one in your packet right after the agenda. There it is.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
Yep.
Steve, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. Any changes on the first one? Okay, we've got a motion to approve. We had a second by Mr. Greenberg. Seeing no changes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Moving now to the June 14th, 2019, our regular study committee minutes. Anyone see any changes? Mr. Greenberg?
On the third page, second paragraph in F, Marcy agreed to draft a list of poignant, wrong. That means sad. What did you mean to say?
Poignant questions. So what I
Those would
meant,
be sad questions.
well, I guess I meant relevant
I think
or
that-
pertinent.
Pertinent,
or-
thank you.
Pertinent.
So that's one
Pertinent.
change. And then in I, same page, can we just move the no charge to before PSA? So it is clear that the PSAs are no charge, not that Marcy's no charge.
Okay.
And yes, that's all I got.
Mr. Dabney?
Maybe a suggested change on 4, motion by Bob. I think Judy's case, despite her, maybe that should be repeated at Tim's.
Which,
Where
item?
are you?
Which item?
Judy dropped earlier.
Above L, I believe, in the motion.
Yeah, above L. Just,
Judy's call had dropped earlier in the meeting, and despite her reported attempt to call back in, you would like that to be repeated?
well, it just
Yeah.
seems like
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah.
it was. She kept trying to get in and she didn't.
We
report.
believe her.
It was really a horse race.
Did you win? Did you win?
Third.
So,
Pretty good.
Any other change besides that? It's very exciting, Judy, sorry.
So, yeah, you don't have a motion on that one yet.
Okay. Well, did you want to make a motion to change that, or is that just a suggestion?
Did you report or repeat?
That's fine. It was fine the way it is.
It's fine the way it is.
Okay.
Okay. So we have Mr. Greenberg's changes. Any second on his changes?
I'll second him.
I guess that's a motion, okay.
And all in favor of approving the minutes with the amended changes by Mr. Greenberg?
Aye.
Unanimous. Moving now to the June 17th minutes. Anybody see any changes on the Casa Valley, Mr. Greenberg?
The Grand Water Sewer Service Building's not in Moab, it's in Grand County. sorry to be so picky here, and the
Oh,
meeting
actually-
began.
Actually,
It's
that
in
should say
Castle
Castle Valley
Should
Town
say
Building.
Castle
Oh,
Valley
right, okay,
Town-
so it's completely wrong.
That was
I
like,
missed that. Thank you.
So with that correction,
Castle
so it's
Valley.
not at the Grand Water and Sewer Service District. It's at Castle Valley Town Hall.
Got
And the meeting, in the third line, the open house began at 4 PM, not by at 4 PM.
Okay.
Just typo.
Any other changes apart from that? Do we have a motion to adopt the minutes with those changes?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, a second.
I will.
Cricket, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Moving now to general reports. Item D, update on information regarding the possibility of holding a county special election of officers during the municipal election year of 2021. Still.
So, if you look in your packet, item D is an email thread. I emailed Gavin and I just wanted to make sure that, because I kind of understood from him the first time I talked to him, that there might be a possibility that we could have an election during the municipal election in 2021 with the city to elect the members of whatever form of government we decide, and that we might be able to actually enact the new form of government in 1/1 of 2022. That appears not to be the case. And if you kind of look at this email chain, he weighed in, and then our clerk also weighed in with the idea that it appears pretty clear that the election of county officials has to be conducted in a general election year, that is, in November of an even election year, so that regardless of what form we propose, it seems that we won't be able to have people run for that system until 2022. So my hopes were dashed, which means, in effect, the new form of government doesn't go into effect with sitting officials until 1/1 of 2023.
I think we need to have some outside legal counsel really take a good look at HB 224 on that. I mean, I agree, that's what it says. But I also feel like there's other time parameters within this bill that we're not lining up.
Like what?
I think if we postpone this, we need somebody to give us a legal analysis of what our timetables are. Period. I think that's highly important. What HB 224 requires us in our time parameters, and saying this is what you have, this is when we have to change it by, this is the dates. Last thing I want is us to be in a situation where we violate the law.
Well, looks like we dropped the ball as a
Where it
committee.
looks like we dropped the ball as a community. So I think having that analysis of what our timetables are for HB 224 for that bill, on top of also what our timetables are when we can have those elections, when we can. So those are just, I'm in the gray area on them. I think I've heard of different analysis of it from different lawyers, and it's just a really gray area that we need a firm, like, what our timetables are. So I know that we're pretty much, I mean, we're not gonna be able to put anything on this ballot, but we need to be able to have a firm timetable that says, okay, we've got this is by this, and this is by this, and this is by this, and I don't feel like we have that yet. So, I mean, I agree.
I was seriously hoping that we could
Do
put it on the
something.
ballot and, elect the people in 2021 so that we could start in 2022.
Walt?
One question,
Microphone.
is this wishing and hoping, or are you hanging your hat on something that you see in the law?
And
right
this
now?
is more of the gray, like there are specific timetables within the law that it's almost like the law has some contradiction in it.
Okay,
Almost.
You know,
but-
I'm not going to flat out and say, hey, they put a lot of contradictions in it. I mean, they did. There's just contradictions in it, and I don't want to be put in that position as this body to put us in a position where we
We do all this work and
we do all
fail.
this work and then, yeah.
Bob, then Walt.
A couple of things. One is the county clerk is the election official for Grand County, and ordinarily what the county clerk says is definitive. I've gotten crosswise with previous county clerks and actually gone to court and won in one particular case. In another situation, the county attorney and the lieutenant governor kind of lobbied the county clerk and got her to change her mind. But notwithstanding all that, the county clerk is the election official. That's one. Two is we also have the opinion of our county attorney on this matter. And three, I think Gavin's analysis is fine. He is the expert on this stuff. I'm reluctant to spend good county money on this. And fourth, the voters have said they're fine with the current form of government 3 separate times, so I don't think it's critical that we gallop ahead to a change in the form of government. I think if in fact the law says what it says, and we're advised by 2 attorneys and an election official that it does, I don't think there's any violence to anything to wait till the legal timelines run.
Walt, and then Mr. Day, and then Cricket.
I was just gonna, Bob said basically what I was gonna say. We have the county clerk and the county attorney. I think we ought to get another reading and just have them put it in writing that this is what the law says. This is what your timetable needs to be, and everybody's already said that. I've read that law a lot of times. You have too. If there's something, Jeremy, I'm serious, if there's something that you see that really is a legal question we ought to ask, then I support it. Other than that, I think our county attorney and clerk can tell us what our timetable needs to be on this, and without spending, as Bob said, money we don't need to. I mean, unless you really saw an opening in there that I think we haven't seen, but I would invite, certainly from my perspective, you to point that out. I'd like to see it.
Mr. Day?
Yeah, I'm just, there's just a couple gray areas and that I look at. I worry that, I worry that we have some timetables, and I would just like, honestly, even if it was Christine, even if it was whoever, to say this is what your timetables are in writing. Here we go. This is our timetable, and here's my legal analysis of those timetables of what we have to do. And that's what I'm looking for. I think Gavin's spot on. When I read the law, when you read the way the state set the code, yeah, you have to have this election during this cycle. But there's also some stuff in HB 224 that I look at that says, well, we have to have this decision by this time and this by this time, and how do they plan out? And so we're just trying to iron that out. What I'm asking for on this is, I wouldn't mind if Gavin even doing it, is an legal interpretation of our timetables, just so I can visually look at it and go, okay, here's our timetables. This is where we're all at, and we're all on the same page. Because as of right now, it's just kind of this is what we think our timetables are. And we talk about it orally. I'm much more of a visual learner, so for me, it would be really nice to have something in writing that says, here's our timetables. And, we'll discuss today more on the agenda item of what me and Bob have been working on with attorneys. I've discovered a lot, how many different attorneys cannot represent Grand County because of this or this or this or this. It's staggering. But but we'll discuss that on a different agenda item. But right now, it really comes down to me just saying, like we go back to Gavin, we go to this. I would just like a legal analysis interpretation of here's the study committee's timetable. It would be, I think, helpful for all of us. And if it's Christina to do that in writing, yeah, that's great.
Cricket and then Walt.
Since you're doing grammar, did you mean violence or violate?
Do violence.
Violence, I meant violence.
You meant violence?
I
There's
meant-
going to be
yeah.
violence?
No, doing violence means,
I know, I'm teasing
Yeah,
you. Okay, so, my question again is, can Christina do it? Because she's supposed to be a disinterested third party and she's not. So that's just my question.
Walt and then
Because she
Marcy.
represents the county and the county cannot be involved.
Anybody want to speak to that
You want
point?
to do a motion, Jeremy? I mean,
that's out of order right now, I think.
Let Marcy.
Well, there
I'm-
can't be a motion on this one.
Yeah, this is just discussion at this point. So
Yep.
I mean,
Just a
we're going to have a
general-
moment where we can do a motion later on over attorney stuff.
Yep.
So
Marcy?
Well, I feel like we do have a pretty, I feel like we have a pretty clear timetable. The one that we shared with the public at the open houses called for the election on 1/1/23. Said we'd put these officers into place in November of 2022, which is a regular election cycle. I personally was interested in trying to find out if we could bump that up a year, move the process along more quickly. And what I'm gathering from Attorney Sloan and our clerk and Gavin Anderson is that's probably not possible. That the best way would be to just stay within the election years of the county.
Judy?
The
Judy?
document from Gavin has
Microphone.
has a lobbying thing here which looks ill-advised, but it's an option if somebody's concerned about it. He says it's kind of a crapshoot, so I'm not really good at craps, so I don't get into that. But I mean, there is an option if you wanna hit your head and then hit yourself in the head with a brick.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? If not, we'll move on to community outreach and possible action. Item E, report on June 17th, 2019 open house and surveys received. Dabney, Greenberg, and Till. Pretty much everybody can weigh in on what they thought.
I think we would have had a little better turnout if we hadn't have been in a huge rainstorm. Because all of a sudden, people start coming in, but everybody was very,
Damp.
everybody shared their ideas and their concerns, and everybody was approachable. They went down and talked to each person, so I think that we learned a lot.
Bob?
Actually, if you think about the numbers, 30 people in Castle Valley is almost 10% of Castle Valley. 10% of Moab Valley would have been 600 or 700 people. So Castle Valley was gangbusters,
They were.
even though it was raining. And although that gave us kind of a display outside the window, I thought it was really worthwhile. It was interesting. It was actually enjoyable. People had lots of questions, which I think we were able to answer most of them. And they filled out survey.
Walt?
This is the third one that I've been to, all three, and I've just been astounded at the attitude of everybody that's come in there. It's been not coming to argue, but to learn and ask questions, because they truly are interested. And the ones that show up at that have been absolutely interested. And while they might put something out on the table, they don't hang on to it forever. They really want to know, this is what I think right now. Is there other information I ought to be considering? So I think we hit a home run by doing these open houses, and I wasn't sure till the first one how it was going to go.
And I think it's impressive that we've spread them out throughout the county. I don't think.
The people in Castle Valley were so appreciative
Yeah.
that we came to them. They were just blown away.
And we did get at least one person from Moab who came out to Castle Valley because that day of the week was
Worked out.
better for her. Yeah.
I could add one thing. The number of surveys received that evening were 11.
Hmm.
And then the treasurer's office, I checked yesterday, they're closed right now, but about 24 hours ago, there were 10 more that could have been from any one of the open houses. So our total is climbing, definitely over, it's getting closer to 130, 140
Wow.
surveys received. I received one from a citizen today also. And if I can just add, I have put out an email, you may have seen it, because the papers were quoting that the employees are going to be interviewed and they're going to be surveyed, and we talked last time that we weren't going to do anything special. I felt like I had to clarify for them what to expect and how they could get their survey here from our office and how they can study on all the posters that are now on the courthouse walls here. So anyway, just to add to that, so I'm hoping to get even more surveys before the new 5th of July deadline. Yes.
I think that the putting them on the wall, visual, is going to really help. So I'm glad that you thought to bring them and do that from the last open house. I think that'll help people.
You bet.
People
And
that
those are the
couldn't
same,
attend.
they are the very same handouts that are at the grandcountyutah.net/change. So.
Excellent. Any other discussion on item F? I'm sorry, on item E. If not, we'll move to item F. Update on booth information for the 4th of July celebration in Swanee Park. Cricket?
Well, I'm thinking probably we want to not do this now because I went and talked to the chamber, and part of being able to do this is to have an activity, like a game or something. I don't think we want to do that. We want to talk to people.
Do the old fishing.
Yeah, or ring
Something.
toss. A ring
And
toss
since it was
before the
my
government.
idea, and I can't help, I just think we probably should withdraw it. I will say that I did talk to them, and they said that $100 fee is if you're not a member. I told them, well, Moab Cowboys not going to do this,
Well,
but they said Grand County's a
The
member,
county is a member
so it would be
of the
free.
chamber.
But I'm withdrawing my idea if somebody else wants to run with it, because I can't help, and I don't want to get somebody into something that they had no idea they were walking into. So I'll put that out there.
Walt?
We would still do it. There were 4 of us that were willing to work the table, I think, the other day. You know, our game could be filling out a survey, which,
I think
Is
they're
an
thinking for
activity-
kids. They're thinking for kids.
oh, is it?
It's for the community for
Right.
kids is
Did
what my
Have you
interpretation
ever
was.
been? I mean, we used to do this as a community
Oh, yeah.
back in the day. I mean,
Yeah.
when Marcy around the rec, she did.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're not old enough
I
to talk
remember.
about back in the day,
I
Jimmy.
mean, but the sad part is that. But it was really fun and interactive. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to be down there anyways. I would love to help out with the booth.
Just do the fishing thing.
I mean, if we do the sheet with the fishing and stuff like that, I mean,
all
it
those.
just you hate those.
I hate those plastic little toys. The kids
Oh.
love them.
I was just
I'd
thinking,
rather have
give
to
them
do something.
sugar, but that's just me.
Give them a soccer.
Do we have a dunk tank? We could put Mr.
Who has
Greenberg
a
or
dunk
Mr.
tank?
Day.
That's the city has a dunk tank.
I think the city has a dunk tank. Guarantee it'll be there. I would hope.
That has been very effective in the past when we've had county government day and we would dunk the elected officials or.
I would sit up
I
there all
haven't
day.
seen it in years.
I just felt like it wasn't fair for it to be my idea, and I'm not going to help, and you guys have to do a game. So that's why I was kind of like stepping back, because I didn't want to put anybody in a place they didn't sign up for when they said they would do it.
I'll volunteer. I'll set up a game or a dunk tank or something. I think it's worthwhile.
Okay.
And if
Well,
there's something to do, if we don't want to, I mean, if the dunk tank's possible, I think that's a fantastic one. Give it an opportunity to talk. If people want to dunk us, fine. They have to fill out a survey to throw a ball or something. Well, only one person can fill out a survey. Sorry, thinking out loud, things I shouldn't do. So I'd be willing to give up my time to go do that, volunteer for it.
Okay, so if somebody's going to do it, I will forward you my email, and it has an application form,
Okay.
and you just click on that and you fill out, and I included a copy of what it looks like.
Okay.
And so I'll just send you that link. So, and she said that if you remember which the county is, it doesn't cost, but they expect a game, so that's why I kind of withdraw.
Any other individuals want
Does it
to?
have to be a game? It could be
She
an
said a game.
activity.
She
Yeah.
said a game.
Activity game. I think
You can
it's
ask
either
them.
or.
You can call them and ask them, but she
I-
told me a game, so.
I bet
How
they
about
want
patriotic
carnival.
face painting? You know, the kids come through and get an American flag on
Like
their
I said,
face.
that's what she told me, so that probably would be okay, but I really can't speak for that.
Marcy, would you like to join me in finding an activity for this thing?
Well, I'll help.
Okay, anybody else want to join in the fun?
Well, I'm instructed by my wife that we have other plans for 4th of July.
Okay, Walt?
I mean, I will help. I can't imagine sitting around talking change in government wearing a swimming suit and all wet. But this is a good opportunity to maybe
Right.
talk to people, and I hate to distract from what we're trying to do and talking to them.
Well, I think my idea is that we would have a table with serious people that are interested in learning about what's going on and
Yeah.
visiting with study committee members, and maybe a little bit of ways we're doing something for the kids. I get what the chamber's trying to do. They're trying to provide activities for the kids for 4th of July. What is more appropriate for the 4th of July than our county government? You know, I mean, maybe it's an opportunity for kids to learn too.
Well, I just didn't feel like I could
Right.
make that argument because I knew it wasn't involved, so I recommend you talk to them directly and see what you can do.
I'm game for helping.
Yeah.
I have a sister coming in from Hawaii at 5.
I'll
so
raise-
I got them
It's 10 to 2, I think.
Yeah, it's booth setups from 7 to 9, and then 10 to 2, or 9 to 2, or something like that, I think.
10 to
But
2.
I will work on getting donations for whatever we have.
Perfect. So,
Stephen?
yes, Walt?
Just another possibility, something that I think is going to be really important for us down the line is the census data for a bunch of reasons. There's some cutoff numbers on your population that are going to be very interesting to us now and maybe in the future as to, are we 10,000, are we 11,000 people, whatever it is, but accurate census data is important. And there's a group of folks here that are going to be working on the census that would like to maybe hand out some information with us related to the census if we have any interest in that.
Bob?
That's mission drift that I'm very reluctant to get into. There's certainly, right now, there are legal cases around the census. It's currently a controversial issue. I don't think we should mix those two.
Okay.
And if Cricket and I agree on that,
That's pretty bad.
that's pretty bad.
It's deep water right now. It's
It
really
is.
deep water.
It really is.
All right. So, Till, myself, and Miss Carmichael will figure out face painting, tattooing, and Walt,
I mean,
and
Well,
Jeremy.
I wasn't as game on the face painting and the dunking as I was in just working with
Well,
Judy.
if you're
We'll
standing-
run the table.
Yeah, we can run the
Perfect.
table.
Perfect.
Because I don't good
The
debate
kids and their parents will come to our booth, and the children will walk away knowing something they didn't know before and with some kind of a patriotic souvenir.
Judy and I have done really well with the activity of talking through the survey.
Right?
And,
I mean,
and
what
we're good
if
at
we-
that.
see that?
What if we taught children how to fold an American flag?
Oh, that'd be cool.
Cool.
Oh, that's a,
What if we
That
found
is
out
not
what
a bad
kids think
idea.
about the form of government?
And how they can't drop it
I'm-
on the ground.
Right. No,
Careful.
I've
Might
asked
make
I've
mistakes.
asked some of my writing students if they understand the protocol with the American flag, and they look like I'm speaking Greek. We learned that in school.
Well, I think that would be good.
That's
Cricket?
perfect.
Well, I love that idea. Maybe you get some Boy Scouts to help you.
And I could just add to that, since this is government, Grant County, we do have more than one flag around, but I think we could make available a flag without a problem. Government for government.
I think that's a great idea. And maybe we get little flag stickers that you give them.
But that's what
And
we
that's-
just said, is
yeah.
flag tattoos or something, and the kids go away. I just read a really cool, interesting quiz about stuff about the flag, its history and everything, and have a little trivia contest.
Marcy's a
Perfect for the
teacher.
4th
Wow.
of July, girl.
Teacher.
Perfect.
Marcy's a teacher.
Perfect.
Mr. Chair, may I ask some
Yes.
clarified questions for the
Yes.
minutes? So those working on the activities are Marcy, Stephen, Jeremy, And Walt, okay.
And Judy.
No.
No,
The
we're not
activity
doing the
portion
activity.
is us three, and
No.
then the actual discussion portion is those
Yep.
two.
We're gonna
Okay.
do the.
Gotcha.
Probably the children are, that's probably what's gonna happen. That we'll have an activity for the parents, and then the fun activity for the kids.
Thank you.
Not
I got
saying
that.
that the
Survey activity for the parents.
That's
And
right.
so
For
we
the
don't need to post an agenda because there won't be 4 of you at the booth at any given time doing
That's
this work.
No, yeah,
Correct.
We can make that happen. We could schedule that so there's
We
no-
will not, we won't discuss, we will make sure we're doing the activity.
But I mean, if there are 4 of you at the booth together, that's what I'm trying to understand.
Okay.
Will there be? If there are, if you think that will happen, then I can go ahead and just post it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd
I would
post
post
it.
it.
Okay.
Err on the side of caution.
Good.
Yep.
I like that you all are wanting to have 4 or more. It's awesome.
Well,
Yeah, posting it to me is just another advertisement of another opportunity for people to be engaged. That
Yeah.
cannot do anything but be positive.
And actually, Walton, all we'll need is packets so that we can get people
Yes.
to, give good information.
And I
And we'll
wondered,
explain to them they've gotta have them in by the next day.
right,
so
to the
that we-
treasurer.
Or they can leave them. Yeah.
Mhm. So I'm trying to get an idea of how many packets for 4, if the booth is open 10 to 2.
They're 50.
I was
30.
Yeah.
Well, and
I
if
was
push
gonna
comes
go
to shove,
like
one of us
100,
can run
but
and make
that's just me.
It's hard to make them. Because they're color. I would rather you have more than you need. I don't know.
50. Err on the side of caution. 2 minutes.
50 would definitely cover it,
I think 50.
But also, people might get their questions answered and just leave it with you and recycle it.
Yep.
How many total have we had back from all of them combined? From all the
About
open houses?
140 that have come back. Oh, you mean the packets? I'm sorry, I'm thinking surveys.
The packets that you've
I
made.
don't know, probably.
Well,
An
maybe-
av-
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
What's an average per meeting? 40, 50?
Let's see. I remember making 50 or 30 for the first, and I ran out of copies.
50 sounds sufficient.
Maybe not a packet, maybe we put those up along and then just hand out
On a
surveys.
clothesline.
Just get some kind of sign like that and put those up, let people go through and see them. Maybe they're around the booth. And
That's
then you
good.
then you don't have to have packets and you just have the survey. Because
you
chances
can't
are
let-
people aren't going to walk around them for the 4th of July, they're going to end up in the
Yeah.
trash can.
Right.
Or
One
on-
of the things that's
And
in
the
the
deadline's
packet
the next day.
that they question all the time is the one that explains legislative and executive. All of that material that's in the packet wouldn't have to be used. Because there's just 2 or 3 pieces that they actually questioned us about.
What?
Don't you think?
I agree.
Why don't I have maybe 4 or 5 packets for you guys at the booth?
Okay.
Then you
To
have a
show.
show and tell,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we'll hold them.
Yep.
and then you'll have the posters too with the clothesline.
Yeah.
Good idea.
But-
Which I'll
and it's
print
all
out.
online. And Stephen will tackle anybody who takes off with one of the packets.
Okay, we got it figured out. Thank you.
Mm.
So, is there a chief person I can coordinate with on this? Like,
On which?
On the booth part, would that be you?
Yeah.
Okay, for getting the
Getting a table.
materials to you?
Okay. What about the physical table and all that?
I don't know how that works.
Would you?
That's a
They
chamber,
may have them.
chamber
may
question,
do
I
that,
guess.
I don't know.
Well, I can bring a table.
Marcy will probably check, but even if the chamber does not provide, which I doubt they will, well, I have at the hotel, I have access to.
I have
a
too.
meeting room.
I've got a
I've got-
table
yeah.
and I'll make sure we get that. And
I've got-
the league may
Table.
loan
What
us a
time?
little bit of bunting or something to put on it.
We'll know what time me and you'll meet there, like at 9 and 7.
Okay.
Okay.
That works.
And then she can find out what I need to bring.
Right, I'll look at that application packet and I'll just copy you guys on whatever I learn.
And
Keep
so,
us from looking, try your best to keep us from looking stupid.
so they'll have a place for us to put our booth. Okay.
Just got to sign up.
Yep. Got you.
Okay, any other questions, discussion on item F? If not, we'll move to item G, approving use of Facebook and or other social media postponed from June 14th, 2019. Mr. Day?
Well, I will reiterate once again that it's a rabbit hole with the way the law is stated. Anything posted, we cannot. If we do the Facebook page and we decide that that's a way we want to go about it, then we have We cannot limit comments. We have to allow anybody and everybody because it becomes public record. So, and we have to, Matt has to be able to pull and access it for public record. So it's a rabbit hole when it comes to government bodies or anything like that having those types of pages. They're great. They reach out to the masses. What I think personally is we make all our stuff accessible through the change of government page, through the county. It's all accessible there. You know, if other entities like myself, Bob, Kevin, whatever we want to do as far as political affiliations go, to spread that and share it, that's where I would leave it be. For us having our own page, it becomes something we then have to. It could get slippery. I mean, imagine if somebody gets into a couple keyboard warriors of opposing factions of, you know, just decide to put on their keyboard armor and go to war verbally and spar over it, and it gets ugly, and it's public record, and I just think, yeah, keyboard warrior. You haven't heard that phrase? You love it, don't you? Like it's the reality of the day and age. But keep in mind, that would all be public record, and if it got ugly, we would not be allowed to delete it because it could be used in a court of law. So I err on the side of caution with it at this point. After further investigation, I think it's something that if you want to do, I'm willing to assist in being an administrator, and policing that, but at the same time, I think with what we are doing, I think we have lots of outreach to the community. I know that as far as the GOP is very active online and in pushing people to come to meetings and to speak out. So, and I know that the Democratic Party does the same thing. So I think as far as the platform, our information is getting out there on that platform, on the social media platform, and I don't know that we need to go further down that rabbit hole as a body. So that's my advice.
Agreed.
I've seen some pretty mean stuff, and I've been
Yeah.
worried about going this way because I've just seen, you know, people just going back and forth and attacking each other personally, and not and possibly their business. Which I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about people.
Yeah.
And I just think it's scary because
Well-
some people have nothing better to do than go to war on Facebook.
Self-inflicted wound.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Absolutely.
necessary.
Absolutely. I think people are seeing what, like, Ruth's been posting, you know, about the meetings and stuff, and people are sharing that. So I think that that's probably the best way to go, because you're sharing it, you're letting people know about the meetings, and I've shared them, even with the planning commission, with, you know, what's going on in that way, and just share them when all your friends see it and their friends of friends. If you're like that way, then it gets a ripple effect, and it's a positive ripple effect.
Okay, any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, we'll move on.
I think we could take that off the agenda.
We'll take
Do
that
we
up.
need to make a motion or anything?
Well, so it is on there for action, but I think if there is no motion, you could ask for a motion. If there's no motion, then the motion would fail, for lack of a motion. But since it is on there for action, as you all had requested, then I would suggest the chair ask for a motion.
Okay, is there any motion?
I
Well,
move that we remove that from the agenda.
Well, it would be
Future
a motion
agenda.
to not do it.
From future agendas.
It's the motion for what's on the agenda.
so
Remove the use.
we would need a motion approving the use
I
for.
move that we do
Don't
not
make a
further
motion and it
explore
dies for lack
Facebook
of a motion.
participation.
Don't make a
If we
I'm
make no
sorry.
motion, it dies.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I thought you said we had to.
No,
She
no.
said we
no.
shouldn't.
You have to
He
call
has to
for
call
one.
for a motion, and then if there's
Ah.
no motion made,
That's much
it,
better.
it goes the way
I
of
want it gone.
yeah, the
And
dodo
I'll-
bird.
Also, I've learned the hard way, you don't do a negative motion.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So there's no motions to be had on item G, so it dies. Moving to item H, suggestions for public service announcements. Ms. Till?
So I'm going to just, so before July 4th, that's why I wanted to make sure we were canceling July 4th, that would change everything. So I will get the information out in the local media and radio stations, oh no, did you miss the open houses sponsored by the Study Committee for the Change of Government? Would you like to complete their public input survey and give your opinions? There's still time. Go online, get information, learn about the options for Grand County's future form of government, and I've listed the address. Then get a survey in person or upon request by phone from the county administrator's office or treasurer's office. And now I will put in here, visit our booth at the 4th of July celebration. Return surveys by 5 p.m. July 5th.
Bob?
I don't think you can pick up surveys at the treasurer's office, just
Yeah.
return them.
We can.
Oh, you can?
Well, the
Okay.
paper put it in there that way. So
Right, that's
I just
where-
made it happen.
Okay. And could you add up toward the top,
We need
learn
help.
more about,
Okay,
as one of the things you can do at the booth?
okay. So I will put this information,
Sounds great though, Marcy. I
Out
like the did you miss part. Feeling left out?
I like that too.
Yeah.
I do. Stop by our booth at. So that's where I'm gonna head with this for the next 2 weeks, and then
Are you gonna put anything in there about Duncan Jeremy?
Hey, I mean, we could get.
I
me
thought
and
you
Bob up
volunteered
there.
for that.
I have a feeling that a lot of people would be like, "Wow, let's dunk that Republican." So, if we charge for that, we might be able to afford our attorney
There
fees.
you go.
Hey,
Put you and Bob up there and
Mr. Chair, if I can just add, since we're talking about the booth and some announcements, I did go ahead and, I figured you all would be okay with that. I updated your flyer to remove the open houses that are gone, and it now says, get your questions answered and fill out a quick survey at our 4th of July booth. Swanee Park between 10 and 2. That was
Great.
assuming you guys would want to do it. So
Yep.
it's only, I haven't put it out to the masses or anything except in my email yesterday to the county employees.
Did I see was there another flyer for July 4th over there?
Yeah, it's the chamber's flyer.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
if you want to, it just tells you what all's happening for the whole day.
I'm excited
pass
that they're
that
doing
around.
something again.
very catchy.
I'm excited about it.
That's an action item. Do we have to
We'll
do
have-
anything with your action? With that Marcy's suggestion?
Any other discussion on item H? If not, moving on to item I, suggestions for next newspaper editorial regarding the public engagement process. I can repeat essentially the July, the good thing has been so far that it's been in the paper. We've got Sun News articles and Times articles talking about pretty much the entire process, discussing our booth coming up, that the surveys have to be in on the 5th as well. We can kind of mirror that language again to make sure that people are more than aware. Our next meeting, though, is roughly a month away from our next actual meeting in person is a ways away. So I don't know if listing that out because it's a ways out, but those are the next two big things. I think the public's been pretty informed in the newspapers. I think there's been good coverage about this process.
Unfortunately, the papers did say that they were due on the 4th, but maybe that'll get them out to the 4th, and then, I mean,
Yeah,
it's okay though.
Well, it's Moab, so everybody's
It
always
wasn't your
day
pick.
late. So it'll be Moab time, is what they call it, day late, so it'll be perfect.
Yeah.
Anything else to add to the newspapers besides what we've talked about so far?
Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, Marcy, definitely.
So when will your editorial go in?
Next week. So
Maybe
it'll
you
be-
mentioned the 4th?
Yeah, no, mention the 4th
Okay,
and then
I missed
mention the
that.
deadline.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
I missed that.
Okay. If no other discussion on item I, we can move to citizens to be heard. Does anyone out there want to jump in and give us your 2 cents on anything?
I've been out of town.
Will you come up to the mic, sir? Perfect. So that way we can.
I've been out of town most of the spring, so I've probably maybe missed a lot. Is there a
Can we get a
reason? Is
name?
the only way to
Can-
get a survey to come and pick it up?
So that you can get. So first, can we get your name real quick?
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul Frank.
Paul Frank. Perfect. And F-R-A-N-K?
F-R-A-N-K.
Perfect. To get a survey, you can pick them up in person, you can email, you can go online and request one.
You can request one. Is there a reason why they're not printed in the paper? Okay, there's a reason. Yeah, I've just been hearing about the survey and I haven't had an opportunity to pick it up, so.
Perfect.
Okay.
Did you get one, sir?
Yeah, I got one.
Okay, great.
All right,
Perfect.
that's all I have.
And remember to turn it in by the 5th of July.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else want to jump in?
We did discuss that kind of extensively. As you may notice, we do discuss things quite extensively and decided not to do that,
Okay.
Perfect.
You don't sign your name on it either.
No, the surveys are meant to be anonymous.
which is why we decided, one of the reasons we decided to limit distribution. And just to be clear, this is not a vote.
Sure.
And you certainly are welcome to correspond individually with any study committee member about any issue and, you know, interview us independently and see how we
Okay.
We were afraid of having, you know, a lot of people who aren't actually county residents,
Oh,
that like people forward their email, and we get a lot. We want it to be county,
sure.
you know, all of the people in the county who are affected to have a say. We don't want a bunch of outside influence that really would be affected by our government to have a say. That's why we've been careful where we've asked everybody to please be involved, please come, contact us, we'll get you one, but we want it to be local. Does that make sense? We're trying to,
residents.
yeah, residents, yes.
Excellent. Walt?
And every one of these meetings is open to the public, and you're invited to come up here and speak at any one of them. I mean, we really want to hear from people, so. But as
And-
Cricket said, we don't want a bunch of bogus stuff fed into the system either.
All right, now moving to presentations. We've got item J, presentation on Grand County voting trends from 1960 to present with implications for form of government issues, presented by Mr. Kevin Walker.
Don't see it.
Mr. Chair, we might need a recess. I need to locate the remote control for the projector.
Okay, do we want to take a short 5-minute recess, let everybody stretch their
Is this
legs?
it here?
I'll make a motion to have
On
a
the
recess
table?
for 5 minutes.
Got a motion to recess for 5 minutes. Do I have a second?
Yeah, we
That's
like
the-
that.
Second, all in favor? Unanimous. We will return at 12:58.
So,
So we shouldn't do microphone.
Yep.
yeah, so, Jeremy,
You gotta move the TV out of the way.
so I think we have enough time to get some, so if we had some little patriotic tattoos that we can kids on their cheek. I said, I can create some kind of a little flag trivia game.
I will find a citizen who wants to purchase those.
Well, I'm sure you could buy little flags, you know.
Well, and then I was saying, if we had those little flags, we can make little hair, little things with bobby pins, or we can. I have access to a button machine. And then, you know, we can,
with the checker too, because the cheerleaders.
right, they might be doing this.
That's usually what they the cheer
Right.
drill team.
But I think it would be great as a government group to provide some education to youth
What type of buttons are we talking about?
Well, so,
Buttons or
right, so the,
buttons?
no, so the button machine, making machine, it's like 1 inch around the neck.
Nice, okay.
But so you can
Yeah, we got another attorney.
we could pre-print little round flags and then make the buttons when they come up, or we could have, let the kids color something, I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
Scout around and
there
see
it is.
who has it, but I know I can find that, but I think even if the kids just came, got a little tattoo.
I'm sorry?
Try to figure
No,
out-
no.
try to figure
Oh,
out
no.
some kind of little game. And then, then the prize is a little flag or something. Yeah, easy, but easy. How about a button that says made in USA? How about made in USA? Obviously, there might be kids that aren't made.
There we go. It's on.
Yeah, warming up.
It's on.
I love the idea of having 2 flags there, but you have to have an adult and a child, so the flag doesn't touch the ground. And why do we have
At
that?
the risk of sounding irreverent, the chamber says she may feel assaulted.
That's right.
I think these are the traditions that our country has held sacred for 200+ years.
Marcy, that's a great idea. We
I
work,
said, I'm putting the flag back, and I'm putting the flag back at my house.
And, you know, I've done
And
voting.
my golly, I'm gonna keep credit where your record is money.
Thank-
Because I thought, I want people, I just feel guilty that I'm not.
I understand.
Patriotic too.
Yeah, yeah.
Damn. Horse people can be patriotic. No, they're notoriously patriotic. They're notoriously patriotic.
The boy needed sex education, and he's just not, he's not a farmer.
She has to bring up some kind of reproductive issue, doesn't
And
she?
she just looks out her back window. She sees it going on. It's just reality. I grew up that way. I get it. My kids are first time we got checkers.
Dad, what did it do?
Yep, it is.
I went to the, what used to be the Southeast Regional Target range.
Aiden.
they're rated.
Hey, I will tell you, across the board, kids come from horseback riding lessons. Now, it may not happen the first 2 or 3 times, but without exception, eventually.
Yeah, I remember, that was horrendous.
Lawyer girl.
I do remember.
We looked, you could say, do you guys walk the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, we get chairs, we go out there at the edge of our lane, and Jody comes up, sits with us, her in the chairs.
Call it something
So we have,
else.
she always comes up to read it for someone.
You make the correlation to them. Here, that's what it's called.
Yeah, we do too.
After you do it, you know,
Exactly.
and we shoot our fireworks, we have a big array that kills us on day, there's something for it.
Yeah, we just sit in the middle of the street with a bucket of water.
And so we shoot off
I'm very kind of that. Even though we're, I mean, I think everyone on the block is pretty defensive space.
No, I will raise money.
You know,
Okay,
I'm good at
so
that.
but are you gonna get them? Are you
Yeah,
gonna
I will order them
physically
and get 'em.
purchase them
Yep,
and get them?
I'll
So
raise
you're
them
gonna
and
get
get
the
'em.
tattoos and the little
And
flags.
the little flags. Yep.
Okay.
We ready to go again?
Yep.
All the excitement for all the fun?
Use my
Little
money.
subcommittee meeting going on.
Make somebody reimburse me.
Just shows how
Fundraise
engaged
it.
you guys are.
Well, I'll tell you,
Recorded.
Because they need to get
Colin
it.
Fryer has never told me no.
No,
And if it's for
so
kids,
confused.
if he can write the check to a place.
Just waiting for it to take over.
Capitalize on that.
Oh, good, sure.
All right. All right, the time is 12:58. We're going to call back to order the Grand County Change in Form of Government Study Committee regular meeting. We are currently on item J. We took a brief 5-minute recess. We're on item J, presentation on Grand County voting trends from 1960 to the present with implications for form of government issues, presented by Kevin Walker, Grand County Democratic Party Chair. Mr. Walker, you ready?
Thanks for...
Mr. Walker, could you make sure to use the mic? Otherwise, it won't be recorded for our YouTube audience. Is there a movable?
There you go.
Okay, so one of the questions I wanted to try to address is thinking back to 1993 and the change of form of government we had. Did it give an advantage to one side or the other? I know in conversations with my Republican colleagues, they often cite that as a reason for wanting to have another change. So what we want to do is look at actual voting results from Grand County and see what happened in 1993. So let's start with, we'll look at the county commission and county councils in a moment, but first we're just going to look at statewide offices, in particular the state auditor and state treasurer races. So why those? Because no one knows who the state auditor or treasurer is, right? So if they're voting based on the D or the R.
Damschel and Dougal.
Except for you.
Oh, sorry. I'm a freak.
A few people.
You're party chairman. Definitely a freak.
I know, right?
So anyway, so the results in those races are supposed to sort of give a measure of the underlying Republicanness or Democratness of the county. This isn't my idea originally. I think it's a pretty standard procedure. So here's all the numbers. You can get them off the Lieutenant Governor's website, and when you graph them, so this is the graph we're interested in. And what it's showing is the Republican percentage, ignoring third-party votes, each year starting in, this is 1960, 64, 68, 72, 76, 1980, we're seeing more and more Republican voting in Grand County. 84 was a big year for Republicans, and then something very dramatic happens between 84 and 88. And then after that, there are still fluctuations, but they're less so.
People moved.
Yep.
People
So
moved.
in
You got
hindsight,
it.
This is what
So
we
it's not-
expected.
yeah.
In 1986, a lot of people moved out, maybe other people moved in. And so.
No jobs.
No secret that 86 is a big year, big change in the county. Okay, so what about 1993 and then change of form of government happened around here? Wouldn't necessarily expect it to change statewide races, but there is still fluctuation. And if you look at this next graph, we'll compare the red is the Grand County, state auditor and treasurer vote, Democratic versus Republican, and the blue is the national presidential vote, Democratic versus treasurer.
Wow.
And you'll see that starting early 90s, the two track each other very well. In some sense, Grand County is a bellwether county. If you didn't want to stay up late to listen for the presidential vote, you just look at how Grand County votes for state treasurer at 2.5%, and that gives you the national presidential vote. So the point is that things do change from year to year in Grand County, but it's changing in the same way as the country as a whole is changing. Some years, a lot of people are enthusiastic to vote for Trump or Bush. Some years, a lot of people are enthusiastic to vote for Obama, and that has an effect of who votes. So summarizing, back to the slide. There was a big change between 84 and 88, and after 88, it just tracks them as it tracks the presidential vote, and nothing interesting in this graph seems to be happening after that, in particular not in 1993. Okay, so the next thing, what about control of the county commission and county council? So there, apologize, let's see if I can enlarge it, but we can look at various years and the number of Republicans or Democrats that were elected each year and see how many seats, on either a 7-person commission or a 3-person council. And when you put it all together, you get a graph like this. It's kind of a jumpy thing. So, in 1972, we had 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat on the county commission. Same thing in 76. Actually, I'm sorry, that was 76, 78. it goes back and forth. So what do we see in this graph? Well, at first it just looks really noisy. One interesting thing is that there have been Democratic majorities going back to the early 80s, about once every 6 years. It usually doesn't last for more than 2 years. And here, this is 1993. So in 1993, with the new form of government, there were, of course, it's a nonpartisan election.
That's why I can't understand why we're doing this, but it's nonpartisan. I mean, it should have stopped Republican and Democrat at 93.
Well, but the party still
But
push people. So call them liberal or conservative. Democrat. I'm using Republican, conservative, Democrat, liberal interchangeably. So in 93, briefly, there were 6 out of 7 members who were from the liberal faction in the county, but that changed pretty quickly and it goes back and forth a bit. One interest, so maybe there's a slight downward trend in this graph. I don't know. And then starting 2014, things do seem a little bit more interesting. We've had, this has never happened before, that there have been progressive majorities on the county council for 3 elections in a row. I'm trying to think what's interesting about 2014, maybe this when Bob became party chairman for the Democratic Party and everything went better for us, who knows. So we can try to smooth this out. Here's taking 4-year averages, the same thing. So the trend is mostly conservative or Republican. A few, sometimes Democrats do better. And here's taking 6-year averages. And again, you see a slight downward trend, but the last 3 years are different. But the main thing is nothing dramatic seemed to happen in 93. The way conservatives are doing before the change of government and afterwards seems pretty similar. So, in review, control goes back and forth many times, gradual, and the county's becoming gradually more progressive, I think, but very slowly, and, sort of medium-sized event in 2014. So, my conclusion from all this is that changing from a 3-person commission to a 7-person council didn't have a big effect on, didn't really give any one side the advantage. There's other things that have an effect, like gradual demographic trends in the county, and some years parties are organized, some years they're not. So there's a few other things you can discern from looking at these graphs. One is that starting around 1990, things are less volatile and more predictable in Grand County and nationally. So going back to this presidential graph and comparing, things jump, nationally, there could be landslides, 64, Goldwater versus Johnson, 72, Nixon versus McGovern. There were a lot of people who would vote Republican one year, Democrat the next in national politics, and then that's settled down quite a bit. And the same thing seems to be true. So these days, unlike when our grandparents were alive, people seem to know what party faction they prefer, and they vote that way consistently. And that's, again, that's not news. You can look at lots of national political magazines that are commenting on that trend. Next, over the past 30 years or so, Grand County is becoming gradually more progressive. And so that, we can look, here's trying to fit a linear trend, one of those county council control graphs. You might argue there isn't enough data to support that, and that's true, and there are other things that affect it. I'll switch to a different graph. So far, everything I've shown you is publicly available data, but here's secret Democratic Party data.
Hang on. Let me get my camera out real quick. Hold on.
No
Hey,
photographs.
yeah, we're all getting dragged into the light nowadays.
Anyway, so it's well known that both the National Republican Party and the National Democratic Party, they put a lot of effort into sort of trying to predict how this voter will vote. Apply that to counties, and look at how that changes over time. So here, I've reversed the axis, so now higher, this is the expected Democratic percentage of the vote, and starting in 2014. And it's, these different lines represent different assumptions about who's going to vote and what their turnout rate is, things like that, but all of the lines are going gradually upward. And so I would estimate about 0.5%. So if a generic conservative versus generic liberal in Grand County in 2000, where it's getting 52%, in 2004 it would be up to, yes, just like this. And then the final thing is, what we can also look at these same things for the city council, and it's a similar trend, but it's more extreme. So we get back to the sheet. So here's Moab City, the Republican percentage, and it's steadier. Through the 2000s, this is only going back to 2000. It was a consistent conservative majority. Again, not strictly speaking Republican, Democrat, because city elections have been nonpartisan for a long time. And that started to change about the same time, but now the conservative representation on the Moab City Council has gone down to 0. Why is the county different? I think one reason is that they don't have districts in the city, and so it's really the same electorate affecting every single city council seat. So if you can win one of those races, you should be able to win all of them. And so...
And we're going to have time for questions as well. We've allocated, he's got 4 more minutes, then we've got allocated time for questions as well for the presentation.
Okay, yeah,
I'm just letting everybody know, because I think people have questions or comments.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to entertain. I do better answering questions than joining on with this. So I think my takeaway from this is that, one of the questions you're going to be deciding about is at-large versus districts. I think there are a lot of strong arguments for districts, but one of them is just more diversity on the councils and more representation, so that you get, instead of exactly the same people electing every seat, you get different groups of people within the county, which might elect, might give you more variety on the county commissioner council. Okay, so one last point in the couple of minutes that I have, and this is unrelated to everything I've said. This is a technical one about staggered terms, and it applies whether districts are large, 7 seats, 5 seats, whatever. I was recently talking with Doug Fix, who was one of the authors of the 1992 form of government that Grand County adopted. And he reminded me that one of the big issues at the time, from his memory, was that Utah had just switched away from the staggered 2- and 4-year terms. And so starting before 1990, I forget the year of the change, but it used to be if you were a county commissioner, you would get elected to a 4-year term, and then a 2-year term, and then a 4-year term, and then a 2-year term. Why in the world would we want to do that? The point was that every 2 years, there were 2 seats up. So if voters were, dissatisfied with what the county commission was doing, at every election, they had the opportunity to elect the majority of the county commissioners. That stopped shortly before 1992, and there was a lot of controversy in Grand County, and we had just elected 2 people, and they weren't going to be up for re-election for 4 years. That really frustrated people, and according to his memory, that was one of the big motivations behind people who wanted to change the form of government, because it was the only option they had other than waiting 4 years. So that point about being able to elect a majority at every election, that applies to 5 members and 7 members as well. And so with 5 members, the way you could achieve such a thing is basically because you had 5 seats, and in 2022, seats number 1, 2, and 3 would be up for election. In 2024, we could have 3, 4, and 5. And so you notice in this pattern that every year there's exactly 3 seats up for election. And for a given seat, they are usually 4-year terms, but every 10 years they run for a 2-year term. So again, this is not related to the other things I was making in this presentation, but personally, I think this is a really good idea. A lot of people think we should have recall elections instead, but there's problems with recall elections, and this I think is a better way. That if you elect people, then the die is cast for the next 2 years, but every 2 years you get a chance for a complete change of direction. That's it for the slides. So questions.
So if the committee members want to come back and ask questions, we could have everybody on their mics and we can ask questions for Mr. Walker. We've allocated time for that. So,
Especially that last slide, Kevin. Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah.
I really like that. That was.
Yeah.
I can send you your, this is all a public information, so I can send you the. Oh, this I'll-
Awesome. Thank you.
any questions that folks have for Mr. Walker to jump right in? Bob? Okay, Judy, then Bob. Judy.
Do you think that maybe the reason the city went progressive is the way they vote, where it's not against each other, where they have the progressive vote where you're voting? Is that a possibility
it's a
that
game.
that would be the reason?
Maybe, but I think the fact that it's all at large, and so it's really,
Well, that voting for 3 people and an order kind of thing sort of
Yeah, that's,
is, might accidentally be an answer for that too, Kevin.
yeah, there's a slide that addresses that.
Okay, good.
top 3 vote getter. Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, then
I
you-
would argue that the city has become much more progressive a lot faster than the county. It's almost a kind of a microculture within the city limits versus what we find in the county.
Salt Lake City too.
Yeah.
We've seen the same thing with Salt Lake. It's gotten more and more democratic, more and more
Urbanism.
progressive because of,
Yeah, so my impression is that the city is about 8 to 10 years ahead of the county, that they're both trending in the same direction, but the city's, I would say, 4 or 5% more liberal than. So where, Moab in, say, 2022, or, I'm sorry, Grand County in 2022 is going to be very similar to Moab City in 2016, say, which is when that trend started. So anything you see happening in the city is going to happen in the county, but 8 years later.
so,
That's my guess.
so you're in favor of the districts?
Yeah, I think that, and I'll probably write you guys a letter for some of the other reasons. I'm trying
Yeah.
to stay focused on the data
That's
part
fine.
here, but I do think that having everything at large or having a big percentage at large leads to more homogeneity on the council, and I think that is, I love the city council. They're all my friends. I think they're great. They always vote the right way, but
Then what's the problem, Kevin?
I don't understand that either.
Yeah, but
That
it's
makes
hard,
no
I
sense to
wouldn't
me.
say that they're like it's a diverse city, and they're not exactly a cross-section of the whole city.
So we've got
So it's-
Bob and then Cricket.
So, and I think that is
And then
something to
Mars.
worry about.
So Bob and then Cricket.
So one of the ways to approach this presumably would be to have numbered seats, however you do it. So you're filing for seat number 1, or you're filing for seat number 2, or you're filing for seat number 3. That would avoid the free-for-all that the city currently has.
Yeah, and I think the way that's custom, if you look at other counties in Utah that have, say, multiple at-large seats, like
That's
Salt
how
Lake
they do
County,
it.
for example,
Even
they have
San Juan.
at-large A, B, and C. So it's,
And in terms of Cricket's observation that nobody, since the change of government, has an R or a D next to their name, do you know what would happen if you looked at these numbers based on elected officials' registration as R or D?
it wouldn't be real informative because until recently, over half the people in Grand County were unaffiliated.
Thank you.
So, and that's more than most counties in Utah. We're not a very partisan county in that sense, which is, why personally I think the non-partisan form of government fit us well. Rating people, but that being said, almost every person who's run for city or county council, it's pretty easy to peg them as a more liberal person. If there's a few people who are in the middle.
Well,
Cricket. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I just think it's hilarious that anyway, so basically if we waited 10 years, since this county's behind 10 years, then you probably would be okay with it just being all at large because you figure county's going to be more liberal by then, and right now they're not. You're happy that all your buddies are in the city council and they're your friends and they're voting the way you like, but because we're 10 years behind in the county, we're concerned about keeping districts. Just a comment.
No, that wasn't, I think you misunderstood the point I made. I think Grand County's already at that place where we have an environment with at-large seats, but I don't think it's good. It's going to be a diverse county, and just because, 55% of the voters could elect 100% of the seats, I don't think that's a good thing necessarily. And so I think you could have a proportional representation system where if your voters represent 40% of the county, they get 40% of the seats. That's very rarely done in the United States. And so the next best approximation is districts where some districts might be more liberal, some conservative, instead of all of them being exactly the same as what we have all at large.
Other questions? Well,
Yeah, I think I understand you to say, kind of along with what Rick's concerns were, that if what you were advocating here was control of this by progressives, the best thing based on this data would be for them all to be at large, as far as keeping a homogeneous block there, and that the districts, if I heard what you're saying, gives a greater chance for the diversity of this county to come forward than it might with a fully at-large council or commission. Is that what you're saying?
I was hinting at that. I didn't want to come out and say it because of bad karma, and your positions on other things. And so to take an example, the county recently passed a high-density housing proposal. There are 7 planning commissioners, I'm one of them, Cricket's one of them, 7 county council members. Of those 14 people, exactly 1 out of 14 lived in an area that's affected by those polygons. Everybody else either lived within Moab city limits. You get a lot of that on the county council. They live in the city, but they vote on zoning that's happening outside their neighborhood. Or some people live in the town of Castle Valley, or some people live in HOAs. So Jalen Hawks was the only person who lived in a neighborhood that was affected by those big changes. Now, whether I don't think that's a good thing, and I think having everything at large exacerbates the problem, because you could have all the county commissioners living in downtown Moab instead of now where we just have most of them. So I think there's sort of in town, out in the valley issues and things like that, and districts helps with.
but the other comment, I'll jump in and ask you. That would assume that the person that is elected is outside of the city area. So it assumes that individuals that are actually elected have to be living in those areas, because how we draw the districts is going to be based on population. You said that some of the concerns that you have is having people be in the areas where they're affected, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't have any guarantee, though, with districting that we can put somebody in, say, Castle Valley, Spanish Valley, if we're drawing the districts blindly. There are some instances where there's no guarantee.
Yeah, but the districts are never drawn blindly. I think it's on your agenda for later today. But you're going to be working with this guy, Will Cooper, and he's going to ask you, what are the community's interests? What are the areas that we shouldn't split apart? And so I think if you told this guy, hey, we've got kind of a downtown area, we've got Spanish Valley, we've got these outlying things, and we don't want to split those people between 2 districts because you think their interests are similar, then you can draw districts that will do that. So if you want districts that have a distinct rural versus urban component, you can do that. If you'd rather every single district be, parts Moab City and part of Valley, you could do that too, which, the latter I wouldn't recommend. I respect.
Judy?
I'm going to argue for the other side just a second, because I think part of what we, as a county person, a person who's on the council, our responsibility is to raise the money to run the county, and we raise ours with property tax. That's how we move the boat forward. And in the city where they're dealing with sales tax, that's how they move their boat forward. So districting doesn't really push that agenda in my mathematical mind, because I served on a council of 7 people. We had 4 of them that were 3 of them, 5 of them, whatever it was, for districts, and I didn't really see but one instance in 4 years that it was beneficial to be for that district person. So I think that in Grand County, with the 10,000 of us, I think we're all kind of a group that's going to want everybody's best interest going forward. I didn't care less for the people in Castle Valley than I did Spanish Valley. And I know Bob served also and he was from a district, and I don't remember Bob ever voting something that was beneficial to his district that would have been harmful to the rest of us. So I mean, I'm really leaning towards everybody voting for everybody, so that you have your input into what I want to vote for 5 people. They're spending the county's money. I'd like to be able to vote for all 5 of them. But I do love your idea of doing the 4 and the 4 and the 2. I think that's genius.
Yeah. I just to respond to what you said, certainly I think there are issues that, especially like physical issues, that affect the county as a whole, and it doesn't really matter that much where you live. But I think there is a substantial fraction of the things the county weighs in on. Like a highway bypass is another good idea. You know, people who live on that side of the valley think it's a terrible idea. People who spend their time on Main Street think it's a great idea, and that your opinion is heavily influenced by what you and your neighbors are experiencing.
Bob, question for the speaker?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Judy in the sense I don't think anyone especially voted their location, but I do think there's a difference in kind of what you're interested in based on where you live. And just because you're familiar with it, just because it's you and your neighbors, and it affects you and the people around you more. I agree. I don't think people, vote that parochially, but I do think there's a difference in how interested we are in certain issues. Maybe. I think it's subtle. I don't think it's a giant disparity.
This is really good information.
Do we have other questions for Mr. Walker? Because we do have this on the agenda for discussion. If we have questions directed at him, we could pester him for his knowledge that he has. Mr. Day, any questions for him? Bob?
Well, I just want to say, those of you who don't know Kevin, he's a research mathematician, and I just think he deserves great applause for actually making a presentation that we can understand. So thank you.
We appreciate it.
At least Bob understood.
Yeah. No other questions? Good. Well, we appreciate the presentation, and if we could get copies of those slides, that would be phenomenal. Perfect. The substantive information from item J is on the agenda later, so don't feel that you don't have an opportunity to discuss it. We'll move on to item K, presentation on statistics of Grand County elections showing the history of opposed and unopposed candidates for county council. Cricket?
Well, I just was curious because I think our biggest problem is many times people have run unopposed. And I'm looking at these elections, and it looks to me like only 5 of them were not unopposed. Or were,
No,
I'm sorry,
it's
the
the other way
opposite.
around.
The opposite. 5 years, people had somebody, where they weren't unopposed, and the other one's 8 different elections they were. My problem is I just don't think we have candidates, and I think a lot of times. I think that's our biggest problem for how small our county is we don't have people maybe who have the time or willing to do the time that it takes. And I've seen and I've witnessed and I've watched meetings and I've been to some where people go out and get somebody to run to fill those seats and they really didn't want it. It wasn't their dream. They didn't say, I want to serve the county. And they showed up and they voted because of whatever was going on in the room. And I just feel like we need people who want the job. And I think there might be areas where more people want the job. And I thought it was quite funny that I'm at the Casa Valley meeting and I get introduced to somebody and she's representing the town of Casa Valley on the rec board because nobody, and the quote was, nobody in Casa Valley wanted to do it.
And I was the same way on the solid waste board.
I'm like, see, we don't have candidates who want to, or maybe they want to, but they don't have the time. And that's my concern is there's been so many times that people have been unopposed, where we have maybe an enclave where there's a lot of people who would love to serve and can't because only one person in that district. And so that's just my comment.
Bob then Walt.
I was just gonna ask a quick question.
Okay, Walt.
For only one person in that district what? Only one person ran?
If all of us wanted to run, only one of us would have to have a primary, and out of 4 of us that live within 2 football fields, only one of us could run.
Okay.
And we have 4 people, and I don't want the job. Please don't think that's where I'm going with this.
We were gonna nominate you.
No, you weren't. No, you weren't. But the thing is, we have 4 people here who put in the time, who do the research, who care about this county, and not that there's other people who don't. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we have 4 really good candidates here that we could only have one. And we're also very represented. Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so I just, that's my 2 cents.
Bob?
I took a look at the numbers, and almost exactly a quarter of the races, 6 out of 22, you had unopposed people, unopposed candidates. 2 things I want to notice about that. One is, in this country, we have a long and great tradition of dragging people who didn't want to run into running, including George Washington. I mean, it goes way back. And I wouldn't argue that the people who are reluctant to run, who get dragged into it, were any worse than the ones who were wildly enthusiastic. It makes me worry a little bit when people are wildly enthusiastic about running for office. They don't know how big a thankless job it is. So I think the other thing that we didn't account for here is our districting, which is right now so out of whack you can't see straight. Some districts are 100% bigger than others. We have districts of 800 voters and districts of 1,500 voters. And I'm not smart enough to look at this and tell you whether or not the unopposed candidates were from the small districts. But it stands to reason that if you have half the number of people in a district that you do in another, it'd be way harder to find even reluctant candidates. So I think if we decide to go with districts, and as we redesign them to be equal, I think some of that issue will go away. Maybe. And I think this is all kind of speculation, really.
So we'll go Judy, then Walt.
One of the things I think that we've been forced to go to go to the parties, and I think that that's going to make it easier to get candidates, because when I ran, one of the things is it's hard to have the ego to say you have something that, and if somebody's pushing you to run, if you've got 5 friends that say no, you could do it, it helps. So I think that's a win-win for us to get good candidates. I think we'll be able to recruit better candidates that way, better than me particularly, because I was running on my own ego, and that wasn't so good. So, but I think you'll be able to encourage bright people to run.
You're way too modest.
Walt?
Bob's point on the existing districts really resonates with me, and I was going through my stuff here to try to find the breakout of the existing voters in the districts. I couldn't find it in front of me, but I just know they're completely skewed. I mean, they're totally illegal, as I would bet you.
No, you're right.
Yeah, and so that's an issue that in a small district, it just stands to reason you would have fewer people to draw from on that kind of thing. The other one, Judy, along with what you were just saying, my other question or discussion point is, I think in registered voters, the smallest number is, I think this is right, Democrat, then Republican, and then nearly half of this county is unaffiliated. So if you have Democrat and Republican Party taking care of a candidate, how do we deal with this county that is very largely unaffiliated, and how do they run and get the kind of political backing? Can they run as unaffiliated reasonably? Or I know they can, but they're going to have to come up with a whole different funding mechanism for themselves.
Well, the same way we did before was you raised your own money and you followed the rules, just like we did with.
No, I get that. Okay.
Jeremy, and then Bob.
Well, I mean, I can give you some insight to that. as Republicans, we support Republicans who run. That's where the party money is in our Constitution. What we can't legally give you money according to our Constitution, well, not legally, but according to our Constitution and bylaws that are set up as the Grand County GOP, I am not allowed, no matter what. If Cricket was, let's just say she's unaffiliated, no matter how conservative Cricket is, I by my bylaws, am restricted to giving her that money. So what happens is they raise it themselves. And a lot of candidates do anyways. Like, I wish I could say that we were just this flush, organization with all this money that we could just give everybody with an R by their name $5,000, $10,000 to go run a campaign, because that is what it takes to do a campaign. But what has to happen is they have to personally make personal sacrifices, ask friends, raise money, and do those types of things, no matter what the party does.
Yeah, a follow-up question?
Just a question to Jeremy then. So say Cricket's unaffiliated, and you approach her because you know how Cricket thinks.
Right.
You being the Republican Party.
Sure.
Or Bob with the Democrat.
It's different. It's different, Walt. They're not equivalent.
Yeah, we're really
Different
not,
bylaws.
because I have different bylaws than Bob has.
No,
Like-
but I'm just saying for the.
Theoretically, somebody
discussion,
approaches.
If you came to this unaffiliated person and said, we'd like for you to run with the Republican Party, she would have to register.
She would have to
Okay.
register as a Republican.
Yeah.
Well,
Bob?
And I would venture to say, first of all, the Democratic Party, money isn't the most valuable thing we provide to candidates. It's really technology and access and volunteers. But the Grand County Democratic Party does not have as restrictive a set of bylaws. And in fact, the majority of the candidates that we have supported over the years have not been registered Democrats. And I know you can find that funny, but it's true. Most of the folks we've supported because we thought they were going to be good public servants, not because they were registered as Democrats. Our bylaws just say that for us to support a candidate, they have to believe in democratic ideals, which is pretty darn loose.
Broad brush.
Yeah, it's a broad brush.
Mine's a lot more restricted.
Yeah, so it's very different, in fact.
Cricket?
well, I think also you didn't have to, because everybody's unaffiliated, both city and county at the time. So, truly. And I ran for city council, and I raised over half of my own money. And I would say 2/3 of my own money for that. So the Republican Party did help me, and they taught me some things, but in general, it was my stuff.
One other point I'd like to make on the unopposed, the actual numbers of it, the idea of the number of people that are running, what I think it does is it speaks more closely to probably the number of individuals, just using that and compounding it out, and as opposed to having 13 people on. I know that's not an option, and I intentionally pick high numbers, but it kind of helps, it's useful information, so I appreciate having the information to know how many people are running or not. Walt?
I was just, back to Bob's point, just another clarification question. So if under the new partisan rules, maybe that doesn't change anything for you, but under the new partisan rules, you would have somebody that might put in as a Democratic candidate, and then somebody that is running for something as an unaffiliated. Is that a confusion to the voter as far as splitting tickets or stuff like that?
It
That
could-
hasn't been so far
Yeah, but we haven't been partisan.
in 25 years.
Yeah.
Sure, man. It's an unknown quantity as to where we're at right now. Like, we don't know what that split's going to be. I mean, you just look at the city elections right now. I mean, you have 11 people running for, 3 seats. It's
But
staggering.
they're not partisan.
No, they won't be partisan, but
Yeah.
I mean, you could draw some lines,
I understand
definitely.
that.
And you could look at it and you could get a good idea of what that would look like in a county, truthfully.
But in the county, those people will be listed with a R or a D.
Or a U
a
for
U.
unaffiliated,
Or an I,
or
yeah.
a G for Green Party,
Or a
I
C
mean,
for
there's
constitutionalist.
or C for constitutionalist.
Yeah.
Some
And
of us are
okay.
more libertarian at
Some
heart.
letters
Oh,
yet
sure.
to be designated, no doubt.
Yeah, the good old L's, the I's. There will be that. And, you know,
And
and that's not gonna change. That's the state part, that we don't have any preview over that.
The unaffiliated will decide who they are too.
Oh,
Sure.
yeah.
Probably.
I mean,
We all
that's
know that.
that's the theory, so.
So you're saying, I'm sorry,
I was going to just keep us on track on talking about opposed and unopposed candidates. We're kind of drifting off into questions about,
could I finish that one question?
sure, what's your question?
To Judy, what your point was gonna be that the affiliateds, because we were a nonpartisan for a long time, were comfortable being unaffiliated. Now they're gonna maybe have to make a choice, more so that unaffiliated block may well shrink.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Day, last comment on the unaffiliated, affiliated, unless it ties into being opposed, unopposed.
Bob may agree, Kevin may agree or disagree with me on this, but I think it'll shrink a lot less than we think it will, that unaffiliated.
I agree with you.
I think we'll see a lot of people stay unaffiliated. I mean, there's one thing about Grand County and Moab that is unique, is that we're unique.
Yeah.
We're a unique type of people. Like, whether we're conservative or liberal, we're pretty dang unique. And I think that uniqueness, it'll be a very slow thing over time, you know, that it'll shrink. But I don't think we're going to see a drastic change. I think we'll still have a majority unaffiliated people run. Well, what I'm excited for, and I think Bob and Kevin are probably more excited for, is the people that we do give our stamp of approval, we can raise that up through within our own party system of having a convention and letting the best candidate rise to the top. That's what I'm more excited for the partisan politics, instead of having, you know, 6 Republicans in a primary, is that I can kind of say, these are the ones that get the stamp of approval going into a primary. If they win convention, the rest have to go get signatures. So that, to me, you know, it creates a little more balance, and then they're more answerable to the party platform, and that there's a little more accountability. But as far as what unaffiliated, I don't see a mad rush. As much as I'd like to think we just have a bunch of Republicans coming out of the woodwork as unaffiliated, and I'm sure Bob would love, and Kevin would love to see just a bunch of Democrats sign up, I don't think we're going to see that. I don't think it's really going to affect our voting pattern as much. And Kevin made that pretty clear. The pendulum swings more as a nation in the voting patterns.
Okay.
But we'll have more accountability, I hope.
Any other discussion on opposed, unopposed candidates, the statistics that Cricket brought to us?
No.
All right, seeing none, moving away from item K to general business action items, discussion and consideration of nothing. So nothing there. Consent agenda action items, we have no items there. Moving to discussion items, no items there. And then moving to discussion and possible action on study strategy. Item L, forming a subcommittee to review the completed surveys following the deadline of 5 p.m. Friday, July 5th, 2019, in order to develop a narrative for study committee review and adoption. Marcy.
Okay, so I wanted to know what y'all thought about this idea. I'm leaving town the week after July 4th.
We don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
And so I'm
You asked.
not available that next week to like participate in kind of working on this project. And then the next week literally puts us at the week before our meeting. So I would like to suggest that we have several subcommittees that work on collating and interpreting the information from the various open houses, that if we had 2 people from each open house get together at their leisure, which we can do for the first 3 that have already taken place, that they could go through the surveys, they could record their general impressions, and they could create a narrative document like Judy and Bob did with the interviews that's available to the rest of the committee. So I've determined who these committees are.
Thank
If
you,
you'd like
Marcy.
to know.
Perfect.
And each of us have maybe 1 or 2 responsibilities, but of course this assumes that you were at the open houses, so
I would have rather been there than where
I
was.
know. So, for the Grand Center, I thought that Walt and Stephen could do that. For Spanish Valley, Judy and Marcy. For the Castle Valley Open House, Bob and Cricket. And then for the 4th of July, Walt and Judy. I also think it would be interesting to collate the comments on the districting versus at-large kind of separately from all the open houses and the minutes of these meetings, like putting all of that district versus at-large information kind of in one place. Because I'm seeing that emerge as a big issue, and I think we should be documenting that as we go. Those are just my ideas.
Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, Bob?
I think it's a great idea. As long as a couple of things happen. One is that when each little committee finishes their draft, they circulate it to the other members of the study committee who are at that open house to make sure we got it right. That's one. And two is, I think it's just an error in how this was written up. But I think what I'm hearing from you, which I like, is that it's not just compiling and reviewing the surveys, it's also taking into account the discussions that people engaged in at the meetings, because those gave us valuable information too. The questions folks asked, the statements they made, not just the surveys. And with those understandings, I think it's a great idea.
I have a suggestion.
Judy?
Microphone.
On the survey where we have the districts and where we have, I'd like to see a spreadsheet of everything. Sorry. A spreadsheet that had everything, that had those, like the number of people who were for the districts, the mix, and the all at large. I'd like to see what the people actually said, but just by the numbers. Doesn't have to be anything, just maybe Briney or somebody could just take a look at them all and give us
a tally, a statistical,
a statistical tally of the papers, just so we have those particular things. So the districts and the number of people that we're looking at, whether we're looking at 3, 5, 7, or 9, it would be nice to have just the numbers on that kind of stuff, the stuff that can be in numbers. You know, the conversations we had are not, we're not going to be able to document them that way. But the meeting that Stephen and Walt and I were at Grand Center, if those two come up with what was done at that, I could be put in the loop and say yeah, that's what we did, because it was pretty homogeneous. The groups were really well done, I think.
Cricket?
I think that would be interesting to see, because we put a lot of thought into how to do the questionnaire, and it'd be interesting to see what order, we said choose 4 through 4 being the most one. It would be just interesting to see what people, so you could kind of see a flow, because if we ask them to take the time to fill it out, we should at least give it recognition where we can see it on a spreadsheet to help us see what their vote was, or not. I wouldn't say vote, their opinion. And that's why we were so careful about how we did it, is we didn't try to send anybody in a direction and try to, which is better, this or this. No, we just look at it.
Bob?
Well, I just would like to remind everyone of the advice we got from the folks in Tooele, which was to avoid exactly what we're talking about, to avoid tabulating them, to avoid statistical analysis. I would much rather see a report that said the vast majority of people, or a slight majority of people, or it was dead even.
But we can't.
Excuse me. Rather than a number. A number, I think, will cause us a lot of trouble, because it will give the impression that we're taking a survey or a vote, and that we should then be honor bound to follow it. So I would much rather depend on these little committees to look at, 10 people said this and 3 people said that, and say the vast majority of people said that. I think that's a much kind of safer way to go at it without doing any violence at all to what people respond to the questions.
Marcy?
I'm fine with that. And then after we have these, so then we have 4 separate pieces of information from the 3 open houses and the 4th of July. And let's throw in the odd surveys that we get to the county in with the 4th of July information.
We got a bunch.
Right. And so, and then we look at those 4 documents and kind of on a horizontal axis and try to put together, is there an overall trend?
You need a 4th committee, though, for the ones that get turned into the treasurer's office.
No, Walt and Judy get to do those.
Oh, okay.
They're 4th in overfill.
She already decided. I'm all right with that too. I don't really, I didn't know there was a downside to the numbers. And I didn't know that they had to be public. If there
I'm
was.
not sure they do.
I figured that would just be part of our knowledge from this study,
analysis.
part of our knowledge base. I don't think it needs.
If they're reported here, they're public.
Well, they don't have to be
So-
reported here. The subcommittees could utilize the
Yeah,
data
you could
to
utilize
inform
the
their
data
narratives.
in writing your report for your group.
Oh, that's fine.
Just like
then.
you used your notes for creating your
That's
narrative.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind if
Well,
we count them,
I,
we're gonna have to.
that's,
I want to see that.
Well,
I don't understand why we,
Kevin, who's a mathematician.
I don't understand why we had people fill them out if we're not gonna use them.
I'm not suggesting we don't use them. I'm just suggesting that we talk about trends rather than 9 out of 15 people. If you'll remember, that's what Judy and I did. We didn't say when we interviewed department heads, 13 said this and 1 said that. We said there was general agreement or there wasn't agreement on these issues.
Well, I think that's what you get with the numbers anyway, without giving numbers beyond. But, I mean, you could look at it and see that, okay, in Casa Valley, most of the people, you don't have to say 14 out of 3, but most of the people. So I mean, I just don't see why we can't see that.
No, I don't
I don't know why I
have a
can't
problem with
see
seeing
that.
it. I just don't want it in a public document.
Okay, that's fine, but
Okay.
I wanna see.
But I think we tally that up for, but at the same time, what we do present, I agree with Bob.
I
think that's
agree with
fine.
that too, but I would like to see, cause,
Yeah. I think you have to.
well, that's,
Yeah.
what I mean.
We're
yeah.
gonna have to.
I'd like
Yeah.
to see too.
And
I'd like to see it all.
And apart from that, what you can do is when you're reading the survey, when you're reading the actual survey, you can, if you see a really strong, great point, it doesn't mean you have to ignore it.
No, you have to
No.
Well,
state
you
it.
you
You
state
have to
it,
acknowledge the
Sure.
people.
Yes.
But you just don't have to put it in the caveat of this was the majority,
This was 7 people said this and 25 people
Instead,
said
you
that.
could say a good point was mentioned without adding numerical value.
I was
Marcy?
liking a colored graph like Kevin did where they had, where you was looking at trend. I was thinking circles.
Marcy?
Well, and you notice that I kind of put 2 people on each committee, which allows for
back and
Jeremy,
forth.
you can sit in on any group that you want. You could
Oh,
go to
You
all.
guys messed up.
You could go to all 4 of them
No,
and
we'd
be
love to
the
have you.
consistent factor.
Because I would like to see it,
Because you weren't
Life
you weren't
happened,
there, but
and
you
we won't
life
go into
happens.
those details.
So you
was pretty crappy.
could be
Some
kind
of
of
them.
the consistent
Yeah.
thread from group to group to group.
Yeah.
And just say, this. I think that's awesome too.
I would love to be involved in, any open invitation.
We just have to be less than 4 when we do
Right.
it.
Right.
A
So-
point of information,
Bob?
I'm trying to get my head around, and for those of you who went to the open and public meetings training, how much latitude do we actually have to keep kind of some of the work product confidential?
I'm not actually clear on that.
Yeah, I'm not
I mean,
either.
I don't think it's an open public meeting. I think there's plenty of things that county council looks at in red folders that are confidential. I mean,
Okay.
confidentiality.
Well,
Happens
we
all the
also did
time.
that with the
And what did we
interviews.
call
We
these
did that with the
surveys?
interviews.
Yeah, we
So,
did.
They are
can we order some red folders,
anonymous
please?
and
Red
confidential.
folders coming up.
So therefore, these surveys in and of themselves have already been deemed
Gotcha,
confidential.
okay.
right.
They're
Thank you.
So I think we
anonymous.
can.
And that's one of the
I
reasons
can
we're
think
not
we
mass
can-
producing
We can
them.
safely
Great.
say that we're not mass
I'm
producing
reassured.
this or
Thank
pulling
you.
up a tally.
Yeah.
So that would be,
So a question then, if I may?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm hearing perhaps my office could tabulate all these?
yes,
Is that what you all would like?
That'd be
Okay.
great.
That'd be great.
Okay, we'll do that.
I just think, and maybe, I mean, because we're really careful in saying put them in order for 3, 2, 1, then that kind of gives us their thought process, not a vote, but this is most important to me, this is the least important to me. So that's still not saying yes or no. And that's what I'm interested in, seeing
Like, how many people wanted commission?
number
as
one,
number
and
one?
number one, and number
Yeah.
two, and number three. And I think that's more than just yes or no. And that's why we tried to write it the way we did, is so that you had to really think about which one you thought was the best and which one you thought was the worst. You know what I mean?
Bob?
I'd like to make a motion.
A
So we
motion.
can move along, which is that we
Follow
that
Marcy's plan?
that we follow Marcy's plan, but specifically that we appoint, that the chair appoints committees of 2 to analyze the survey responses at each location and the discussions at each location and provide a narrative report on this to the study committee. Did I get it all there?
And the.
So we have a motion.
And that we
Ruth
ask
tabulate.
the administrator's office to
Confidentially.
tabulate the survey results for each location in the treasurer's report and to forward those confidentially to each of the committees.
Boom.
Must be right, we agree.
Must be.
So
And
the,
I'll second it.
hang on, to the treasurer's office to tabulate? Okay. So we,
Not the trace, the administrator's
the administrator's office. So we have a motion to appoint, for the chair to appoint committees of 2 to analyze the surveys on each location and provide a narrative, and for the administrative office to tabulate each
Location.
To
each
tabulate the
location's
surveys by location.
by location
The discussion.
and the discussion. Do we have a second?
Yes, Judy already seconded.
Confidential, add that part.
Forward them confidentially.
Yes.
Seconded by Judy. Judy. Who's Judy? Discussion. Marcy.
Do we want the administrator's office to tabulate them as a total after the 4th of July as well? So we're gonna do it by open
Location.
house and,
Then a total.
And location. Treasurer here, 4th of July.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Any other discussion on this?
yes.
Marcy?
It's your idea.
She's changed her mind.
So the comments that people wrote are going to be included in the narrative.
Verbatim,
In the narrative.
and they should be verbatim in the summary that
Okay.
Ruth gives us.
That are found on the.
Great.
And can I add, if my second's okay with this, and that the draft reports from each location are circulated to the other committee members who attended those meetings before they're presented to the study committee.
So you'd like to amend your motion to include that they be circulated to the individual members that weren't part of the subcommittee, but that attended the meeting
Yes.
minutes, and
That's fine.
To be
that would be second, to be approved. Any other discussion?
Just that we can get as soon as the administrator's office is finished with the surveys, that they could notify somebody on
Sure.
the subcommittee and we could get started.
Yeah, because we could get started just as soon as you give us the numbers.
Okay, any other discussion?
I'll sit right behind you while you drive and read.
Okay,
it.
seeing none.
One
Yeah.
quick question, so we're doing it by open house, but did I understand you do want a grand total?
No,
Yes.
So I'm seeing a no. and
Yes.
seeing
of
yes.
all of them?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what
All
we
of them
said.
put together.
Well, who's going to write the narrative on that?
Well, no,
No
just,
narrative.
just,
It'll just be total.
That's gonna be
Just a
confidential
tally.
thing on it. That's just gonna be a
And it'll be
countywide.
and
confidential, just
it'll
a
be in,
tally.
So
I mean,
I'll
we're
do
all
a
gonna add it
a
up on our own
spreadsheet.
if we did it individually anyways, so it might as well have a,
So
tally
we'll
in.
have subtotal
I
for
mean,
each
we
of
will.
those groups and then a grand total.
yes,
I got it.
please.
But we don't need to
Please.
know that till after we've done our part of it.
right.
That isn't, the numbers are coming after we've done the narrative. And we've looked at the things and said, this is how we feel about it. That way we've got real information, don't you think?
So
I
then
don't-
you need
No,
to
I'm-
surveys, not me.
I'm
No,
hinky
no,
about that.
no.
Are you?
Yeah,
I-
I really don't like that. I think if you want all the numbers, you got to ask each group. I don't,
Okay.
you can tally it on
Well-
your own if you want, but I don't think that should be,
Wouldn't the numbers inform the narrative? Isn't that the purpose?
I'm
of
sorry.
doing it? Wouldn't the numbers inform
not the
narrative?
overall numbers, because we're
Not-
doing
not
this by
used in it,
location.
But I'm saying inform.
By the location.
We're doing it by location.
He's wanting the numbers by location.
Yeah.
And that's all right.
But it seems to me, this is just, I'm sorry, I'm not, never mind.
No, please. No, please.
No,
Just
I
saying
really, yeah, I mean, I get where Bob's talking about, like, the individual narrative and everything, but I don't understand or see any reason why there isn't an overall tally of all the surveys that come in to the county, no
Well,
matter.
it's not my
no matter
intent,
what.
but I guess Ruth could send each committee the full thing by location, and you can tally them up if you want.
I
Well, by
plan on
location,
tallying it up
I
one way or
happen to
another.
agree with
tally
Jeremy in that.
I just don't
Well,
see.
that's
I-
not
Hang
my motion.
hang on. One at a time. Marcy's talking.
That's not my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Marcy,
Right. That's not in, okay.
that's not in his motion.
I agree with Jeremy for sake of discussion that, that I think subconsciously or consciously, we have a curiosity about what's going on kind of countywide. So why not just put it out there?
Okay, Cricket.
Okay, so I agree in that, but it'll be on a spreadsheet, and this is what, this one. So what does it matter? And then the end, the final total, so I don't see why that's a problem. I don't understand why that's a problem. Because we're not going by numbers as a vote. We're looking at the trend, and it would be interesting to see the trend right there for each place.
Ruth, Jim.
Well, that's kind of my point too. I just didn't understand, what are we trying to
Accomplish.
But my real point was that you would want your numbers confidentially to inform your narrative, not that you would put those numbers in the narrative, but it's going to show you the trends. Without the numbers, what are you looking at?
No, you're going to provide us with the numbers for each location. That's what the motion is. And if you provide them all on a single sheet with all the locations on one sheet, that's your
Well,
decision.
it would be subtotals of each location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the grand total, just like what Chris
Well,
was saying.
he's saying, what he's saying, if I'm understanding you correctly,
So
break them
I
down by
think-
area, but no grand total.
Right, I think we should
That's what he's
write our narratives based on what happened at each location,
Well, we will.
not on the grand total.
But we will.
That's all.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
I don't care who sees what.
if I could just have one more comment.
Yep.
I know that there were people, we're going to get all the ones that are turned in for the treasurer's office, any county employees. They live all over the place. So to me, I don't understand why there's this distinct, I can understand for Castle Valley's sake, but there were people from Moab Valley over Spanish Valley, vice versa.
Right.
People made it based on when
It
they could
wasn't
attend,
regional.
not where it was
It
closest.
wasn't
we're all,
demographic related. It was who could come, what time, when,
so
where.
that's just my 2 cents.
Marcy?
No, but I think the study committee members that were present at the open houses definitely had a sense of the tone of the meeting, and if through interaction with other people, really kind of that informs you in a different way than the actual numbers that they write on the paper. And so not knowing what the grand totals are and just reporting on the open house that you attended, I think that happens first, and I think in the final analysis we say, okay, we have those reports in, and here's how the 4th of July and the surveys that came in individually, here's where they weigh in, and this is kind of what it looks like as a county.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm just going to guess here that Castle Valley is the only place we heard that we really want our own representative. And that's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's got it.
It's not realistic, but it's still different.
Spanish Valley had some.
It's okay.
Walt?
Well, and they may have said something, they may have put something down on the survey that they didn't say to us personally,
Mhm.
Walt?
Or vice versa.
This is an interesting discussion as far as writing up the three of them. Ruth maybe has initiated this, or four of them. I was at all of them, and there was no difference in tone to me in any one of those things. The conversations were exactly the same. I will tell you that a lot of people are definitely confused by some of the nomenclature in this whole thing, including a former council person and a current council person who were confused over council versus commission and what could do what and what had the appointed or elected administrator and all those kind of things. So maybe Ruth's question is right, unless we really want 3 or 4 groups to write this up. I mean, there wasn't a different personality to me in the different locations, with the exception of what Bob just said at Castle Valley. Every one of them pointed out that they used to have Bill Hedden, and then they had nobody until Greg Halliday that represented them as a district. And then I pointed out to them, but your district also includes Spanish Valley. And they went, oh, yeah, that's right. So,
I still think it's great to divide the work.
okay, if that's the purpose, but I'm just saying, I don't think it's 3 geographically different.
We
but
still have a
not
motion for Bob?
Yeah, did anyone other than Walt go to all of them?
Well, it's the only one. Well, myself.
And
Ruth and I, yeah.
Well, I think the alternative would be to have a committee write a report on the whole shebang. But Walt would have to be the spearhead of that, since he went to all of them. And I suppose we could take volunteers from other people who've been to 1 or 2. In which case, if you want to go that way, I'd be fine with it, but you'd have to vote no on my motion.
You know, what we could do is just, if I'm going to be on this thing, and whoever else is, we can just tell you when we're going to sit down and work on this stuff, and we can sit around and talk it through and write the narrative collectively, which I'd be perfectly. Huh?
With the 3 of us.
With 3 people, yeah, and then share it with everybody, because I'm real good with sharing it with everybody. And Jeremy, for example, since you couldn't be there, if you had questions about what does this really mean or that kind of thing, that would be helpful as well. And if it's not clear to you, but I will tell you, at least at 2 of these open houses, people said, now how are you going to use this? Is this a vote? And I said, absolutely, it is not a vote. What we're just as interested in, or more so, is why you think these things. What is your rationale for why it ought to be districts or at large or some combination, or 5 and 7 or commission, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping on these surveys there's a lot of discussion on here, which I think is really helpful to us.
We'll take a substitute motion.
So we currently have a motion that is to divide up the work into 2 separate, or 2 committees of 2 for each of the locations as Marcy originally laid it out. That was breaking it into the Grand Center, Spanish Valley, Castle Valley, and then for the 4th, and then have those provided to the administrative office to tabulate them and to confidentially transfer them over to send them to the next group on. That's what the motion is now. So if there's no other discussion, we would have a vote on that motion. Marcy, point of clarification?
So Walt, would you be willing to chair a committee to look at all the locations and all the surveys that come in and put that together for the whole shebang?
If I have if there's 2 or 3 other people on it with me, Judy and Stephen, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all I need to know.
I don't want to sit there and do it, but if the 3 of us are going to do it, I think we could sit down and hammer this out and then share it with everybody else.
Okay, we still just have that one motion that's out there. Okay, no other discussion. We'll have a vote on the appointing a committee of 2 people per area, have them provide a narrative, and to tabulate or give it to the administrative office to tabulate the numbers on each office, and then to confidentially transfer them to, I can't remember who they're transferring them to.
Each committee.
Each subcommittee, and circulate it among the members that attended each location. So all those in favor? 0. All those opposed? Everyone.
All right.
So
Can I make another motion?
So now we.
Can
now
I
we
make
have a
another motion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we appoint a committee of, to be chaired by Walt with Steve and Judy as the members, to analyze the survey results and the discussions at the open house meetings and to provide a narrative report. And before it's presented formally to the committee, to circulate it to the rest of us for comment, or I should say, the rest of us who've been to meetings.
Come on, don't be mean.
No,
That's just spiteful.
no, but these are for edits. That's my motion.
See, just rubbing it in. If you only
I'll
knew
second
what
it.
I had to deal with.
Okay, we have a motion,
Literally.
motion to appoint committee, headed by Walt Dabney, headed by Walt Dabney with members Stephen Stocks and Judy Carmichael to analyze the results of the survey and compile a narrative and circulate that narrative to all members who attended the meetings, the open house meetings, for edits. And it's been seconded by Cricket. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a vote. All in favor, raise your hand. Passes unanimously.
Okay, is there no more tabulation then? Or is that just something you guys want me to do? You don't have to have a motion for that?
There's no tabulation.
Well, no, I think
No,
if you guys want to tabulate it, go for it.
Well, I mean, we're not gonna tabulate it and do a lot of work and then you guys not use it.
We're gonna use it.
You will use it, then that makes total sense. We're happy to do it.
Go for it.
Go for
Mr.
it.
Chairman?
No, I think you ought to go in and do a complete tabulation of everything and just let us deal with it. Again,
Because you're going to look at trends.
we're
You're
gonna
not
look at
numbers.
trends. This is not a vote. I think we all know that.
Feedback.
I promise you that people are confused about this thing, and to take this as a knowledgeable, this is really what we think, that's our job. We've got to really,
This was an educational thing.
for all of us.
For all of us.
Honestly, I've been in this job, I just have to say, I've been in this job and for all these years, I'm like, yeah, there's 7 or 8 administrators here in Utah. Oh, well, that's not an administrator, that's a county manager. And that, I had no idea, that person, I've sit in
Yes.
meetings with them, I'm on phone calls with them. I had no idea the differences in their responsibilities. You know, and that an administrator in Utah is only with commissions, it's not with councils, because we're really a commission, we just didn't want to call ourselves that. That's true.
It is. It's absolutely the truth.
Really what we
Absolutely.
are. I think it's hilarious.
So, any other discussion on forming a subcommittee to review the completed surveys, following the deadline of 5 p.m. Friday, July 5th, 2019?
I can just say that I'll do my best to have something for this next meeting about a month away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Everyone still doing well? No motions for a recess or anything?
Quick question. So Ruth, you won't do this until after our close
After the
of the receiving stuff. Okay,
In
perfect.
fact, I'm on vacation next week, by the way.
Good.
Enjoy.
Thank
Good
you.
for you.
Moving now to item M, report on additional fee information for engaging of outside counsel continued from April 12th, 2019, and approving proposed contract award for drafting the optional plan ordinance postponed from May 17th, 2019. Mr. Day.
So I have called over 6 law firms in the state of Utah, including
Bless you.
Par Brown, David Church, Lisa Tatton, I believe her name was. I got leads with every lawyer I'd speak to. They'd pull up their conference, they'd pull up their thing and say, "Yeah, sorry, we can't represent you either because we represent Grand County or because we have litigation with Grand County." So confidentiality stuff was just where we went to. It was rough. It was really rough. Like and I got really excited with one of them because Todd Wheeler he's a state representative and he's also an attorney and he's one of the guys who knows HB 224 in and out, and he was super excited, and then he pulled up and he's like, "Oh, sorry, you're in litigation with our client who's a pharmaceutical company with Grand County,
right.
some part of that."
All
And
right.
so he couldn't represent, and he would have been he could have given us, and for very affordable, he couldn't do it.
Pharmaceutical company.
Right? He couldn't. Yeah. Right. Like, so there was a lot. There was a lot of people that it came down to this, and then there were some that just flat out said, like Kurt Knight and McConkey just flat out said, we're not going to represent you. It's just, what we would want for that fee would be too much for kind of what you guys are asking. So it really comes down to is what we need to discuss is if first and foremost, do we feel like we need legal representation? If we do, the two people that we have had is Steve Russell and Snell and Wilmer.
There's a third.
And there is a third. Yes, I was reading that too. What you got, Bob, was that outside counsel from Colorado.
No, she's from Moab.
Oh.
She's now licensed in Utah. This is Lee Singleton. Her proposal and quick resume are attached in the packet.
Mm-hmm.
She attended the Castle Valley open house, so she obviously has a little bit of interest in this. What I find interesting in all these is that the differences in money are purely an artifact of their hourly rates. They're all kind of seeing it the same way in terms of hours, between 20 and 30 hours of work. So they're probably wrong. No, they're probably in the ballpark then. I would personally like to keep this local, and I'd like to do it for less money rather than more. And I know that that you, Cricket, have some reservations about using Mr. Russell. I'm perfectly happy to use Lee Singleton. I mean, she does have the advantages that she has no connection with this as a relatively recent arrival in Grand County and recently admitted to the bar. So she's kind of a blank slate. So maybe she'd be a good choice.
I think she's on the reg district now.
So she's the one that's representing Castle Valley because they don't.
Yes.
She's the one who's representing Castle Valley who lives in Spanish Valley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I represented Castle Valley on the solid waste
The point right
district.
there is,
It's too small. It's too small. There are only 400 people.
Okay, so keeping it on the attorneys.
Yeah.
She's got horses?
I mean,
Judy likes it.
Discussion on it?
what is Lee's background in? Do we know?
I talked to her I didn't know her, but I talked
I
to
didn't
her
either.
she said she's a corporate attorney, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. She represents businesses, and what she said is businesses manage to have every legal trouble you can imagine.
There's some truth there.
But that's been her primary interest.
Corporate law.
She's had a house here about 8 or 9 years. She lives out by Marcy and I. She's had a house out there in the valley.
Her Colorado residence is, I don't know where, but she works in Denver a lot.
And she was concerned about the schedule. I told her we were aiming to give our outside counsel our finished work product in the fall, in September. And she said, oh, if it's that far out, yeah, I can pencil out the time to do it, no problem. She thought it would be reasonable to allow outside counsel 3 weeks to get it done.
Is she going to bill us for time that she spends with the bill?
With,
HB 224? Is she
I-
familiar with it?
I'm sure she'll bill us for all the time. All 3 firms that are in the running say they'll do that.
Cricket?
so will she give us our timeline? Study the law and give us our
Oh.
timeline?
She would if we asked her to. That's not
I mean,
part of
that-
the scope of work that she's proposing.
That's what we're gonna need.
Well, I thought we had kind of informally agreed that between our Salt Lake guy, Mr. Anderson, and our county attorney and our election official, that we get one of them to write it up. And since it's not really part of our proposal for a form of government, I don't think it would be problematical for the county attorney to give us a legal opinion on that, or for her to ask her civil consultants to do that if she feels conflicted. and let her do it on her nickel. Anyway, but I'm sure Lee would be happy to give us a timeline if we asked her to, but that would be an additional question. And I think it would be for all these guys.
Marcy?
Ruth, do you want to illustrate this other item M? This, I had the impression you were thinking that we were putting the cart before the horse by trying to engage legal counsel without specifying the scope of the work.
Okay, I can address
Well,
that.
two of the three gave us a fairly detailed scope of work. Steve Russell's the only one who really didn't.
Are we under an obligation, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are we under an obligation to follow the purchasing procedures with the county?
Well, so this
Or
has
can
been
we
a,
just wing it?
No.
we really kind of are, not technically,
have.
not legally, but we are because you're using county budget money.
So,
So for that reason, we believe that you are and that you need to follow
Let-
county processes.
And we have. We've solicited 3 bids.
Right, and that, had they been over 10,000, then we wouldn't have been following county process, but we're fine on everything.
HB 224 gives us the preview to exceed that if we need to. At
The
any,
budget,
at
yeah.
any time within the law.
One of the
budget.
things I don't think we ought to be doing is paying anybody by the hour to learn HB 224, when the one person one of our people was up to speed already. So
That's, I
Who
mean,
was that?
that would be the
Okay.
pro with Snell and Wilmer.
Yeah.
Snell and
That's-
Wilmer, that would be their pro. I think the con would be they're not local. I'm
And
of
they're
that
expensive.
mindset, and they're fairly.
And they're conflicted. How would we resolve their conflict, Steve?
Yeah.
As an
Where's
attorney?
What's their conflict?
So you'd have to get waivers
From who?
We've already signed one with the
From
from
who?
any of the parties that have
Counties.
So the
conflict,
county would have
county's
to,
already done a waiver, and we've already done.
theoretically speaking.
Or Snell and Wilmer have, not we. I wish I was we. I wish I was
What's
Snell
their
and
So the
Wilmer.
Republican-
What's their conflict?
Yes.
I don't know their case well enough to tell them what the conflict
They
is.
rep-
The
There was
conflict
no-
is they sued, well, they were the attorney for those
For
who
the GOP.
sued the county on this
Yeah.
very issue, right? So I remember our county attorney saying early on that a new waiver would be needed, not just the waiver
Yep.
that's been signed. A new waiver with the firm.
and in response to your concern, arguably, they got it wrong.
Well,
I
All
just,
the way.
it's so much cleaner if we can go with a local person that is not affiliated with any of these lawsuits or that kind of thing. I mean, waiver is one thing that may technically fulfill it, but there's going to be a perception with some people that this is not
And-
enough.
and keep in mind that the attorneys that would be heading this would not necessarily be the same attorneys that represented.
We
and
just
Snell
wouldn't
and
have to
Wilmer.
explain that to
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
if we stay.
But I agree. I think
Cricket's
there's pros
next.
and cons.
Yeah.
Cricket?
Well, whoever, if it is her, she still has to do the law. She has to
Oh, yeah.
study it, and she has to
Absolutely.
give us the timeline.
That's right.
Because that's what we're hiring an attorney for.
That and to write it.
To write
We're
it,
done.
to write it after, but we still need all these legal opinions we're asking for, we need somebody to give them to us. And I know that there's some discussion whether or not the county attorney can do it, but when I read it, it said that the county attorney represents the county. We cannot be involving the county, just taking their money and their space to do this and having Ruth help us. So I just don't think that we can, I appreciate Christina's, but I don't think we can do that.
Marcy?
It's yeah.
So
Slippery
are
slope.
you suggesting, Cricket, that we need access to legal counsel as we move towards making our recommendation?
Well, of course, but most importantly, we need to know about that timeline, because what if we go through all of the circles and jump through all the hoops and dot all the i's and cross all the t's and then find out we made a mistake on interpretation of the timeline?
So this proposal is
Bob's
drafting
next.
the optional plan,
I know.
not consultation.
That's like the court
Prior
for the
to.
horse.
process.
Bob?
Well, the other thing we ought to consider is that Gavin Anderson, I think it'd be fabulous, and he certainly has done all the studying one could hope for, has indicated that he would ask his boss whether or not he could do it.
That
And
would be awesome.
to my mind, if he could do it, that'd be great with me, unless he's going to charge us $1 million.
If he could do what?
If he can be
Be our attorney.
our attorney, he's already giving us legal opinions.
You mean and write this for us?
Yeah,
Oh, hell.
yeah, he said he would, in his last
I mean,
email.
that would be awesome.
It would be.
That would be fantastic. I mean, that's why I was so excited when I got a hold of Todd Wheeler. That's actually who Par Brown recommended, was Todd Wheeler, because he could write it.
So,
You don't have to teach
So a
Gavin
motion-
anything.
No, Kevin, and he's already read it.
Bob,
I hate to do this to us
Down the
again,
field.
but I think we ought to table until we hear back from Gavin Anderson.
Well, let's
so we've got a motion to
Let's make-
table.
Well, let's make a motion to ask Gavin Anderson to see if he can do it.
Well, he's already said that he would do that.
Oh, so he is doing that?
Yeah, it's
He's
in that
gotta
email
ask.
chain.
Is it formally doing it for us?
He's got to ask.
He's asking his boss if he can.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, let's motion the table.
So we got a motion to table. We have a
Postpone.
motion postpone.
Postpone,
Next item.
thank you.
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
Bob did. We've got a second by
Well,
Well,
Walt Dabney. Discussion. I will jump out first. If you look what this item is called, this is called that we've continued it from April 12th, then to May 17th to now. We're trying to keep a schedule and deadlines, and every single time we've pushed this item back, and we're not getting any closer. We have questions that come up that people say, we really need legal counsel. And now what we're hoping is, by the time next time comes around, he is reported back from his boss, whether he can do it or not. Then we'll have to wait for him to get us a bid, whether he can do it or not. And we don't meet for another month. So that's my concern, is time and time again, we're pushing this back again and again and again. And I'll vote no to table it. So,
Luckily,
Bob?
none of the matters that we need consultation on, like the timeline, have to be decided in the next month.
That's correct.
Well, you've got members that are asking for legal counsel
Well,
now.
I understand that, but the subject matter on which I think we all want counsel
We also don't
is
have,
about dates that are a year or two out.
Sure. Judy?
we also don't have anything for them to write yet.
Right.
anyway.
That's correct.
So we're really not in a, I know it's hard to be chair and to push stuff off, but,
do,
Cricket?
if we heard back from him, can we vote, or do we have to be in a meeting to vote?
Have to be.
We have to meet about it.
Okay.
I mean, we
I
could
was
make a
afraid of that,
motion.
but I just thought
And I would
to
expect
speed it up.
that if we had passed this motion, that Marcy will reach out to him again and let him know that this committee is very enthusiastic about working with him. And so please move ahead expeditiously and let us know what it would cost us. In the best of all possible worlds, Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office would pay for it.
Man,
Government to government.
we have a motion.
the city'd help us to even do anything.
Any other discussion on the motion to postpone item M?
Well, I don't know if I suppose this is relevant to postponing, but we could elect to call a meeting in between now and our regularly scheduled meeting specifically for this issue.
Well,
Do we have any idea how long Gavin needs to
He
run
didn't
this
say.
down?
Marcy would have to reach out again.
if I were to give any advice to anybody reaching out to him, I would have to encourage him to give us a bid.
Right,
Not just a, yeah.
He has to give us a bid.
He
We have a
has to
required
give us a bid.
absolutely.
Right, and do we actually have the scope of work?
and he,
Have we ever even specified
No.
that? Jeremy, you've done that in your proposal. Does it include,
so when I specify the work, I say, first and foremost, familiarize yourself with HB 224 so you can be a legal expert in any questions that we have according to that bill, according to that law. And secondly, your expertise in writing and drafting our governing documents and optional form of government that we will be having. That's usually what the scope that I go for when I ask them those things. So, and I would reiterate too on Ms. Leahy, just in case Mr. Anderson can't do it, and we do decide to kick the can down the road, that I would add on to her billing also, if she could analyze what it would cost for her to analyze and become
Well, because Lee has not seen what you've sent to all the other
I can send it to her.
attorneys.
Yeah.
I think,
Did you send those to her?
She has.
she has,
She
she
has.
got Jeremy's request.
Well,
No,
no,
she got their
didn't
response.
get that. She didn't get that. What I sent at Bob's request was the proposals received from the other attorneys.
Right, but I'm saying she didn't receive the initial correspondence saying,
Well,
this
none
is-
of us has
these
seen
are our
that.
criteria, this is our.
None of us has seen that.
I believe that was.
my
Maybe
impression-
we need to send
I
that
think it's in
to
our
Steve
I think it's
Russell
in your
also.
packet.
I think it's in our
I've
packet.
forwarded it on to Ruth. Anything that I send out, I've CC'd Ruth in it, or
I've not
Whatnot.
seen it.
but
Very
it's
early.
actually a very straightforward question that I asked Snell and Wimmer, and that I've asked all the attorneys I've spoke to. You know, what would it take for you to become your legal analysis of H224 in regards to assisting us in any questions that we have throughout this process, and then also drafting and finalizing the final change of government plan.
So my issue with Lee's proposal is that I don't think she understood that it requires answering questions as
For
we go
HB
through the process.
Absolutely.
And so I think, in all fairness to her and to Steve Russell and to Gavin, that we correspond the same information that we've corresponded with whoever,
The other attorneys?
the
Yeah,
other
I agree.
attorneys, and say, we need a response by X.
ASAP.
We'd appreciate, could you revise, would this new information create a revision in your proposal?
Cricket?
So, asking you, because we need to get the ball rolling, could we set a meeting for next Friday for just a small, to handle
That
this?
assumes that Mr. Anderson gets back to us in.
And if he doesn't, then we move
4 days.
on, because we got to get this done.
How about 2 weeks? I'm kind of with Bob. I get that we have questions, but
There's nothing immediate.
I don't know.
I think we can depend on Steve as soon as we have the information. If it's too far from a regular meeting, to call a meeting, because he's concerned about moving this along.
I am.
You could call it, you could call
Yeah.
it a special meeting.
Okay. So we've got the motion. It's been seconded. Any other discussion?
Can
Would
you
you-
review what that was?
Yes,
Sorry,
would
the
you-
motion is to postpone item M into our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Until we hear back from Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, or alternatively until, well, that's not the motion that's on there, but that's the original motion.
Do you want to amend your motion?
Sure, until we hear back from Gavin Anderson.
If there's an amendment to the previous motion.
Well, that is
And-
the original motion.
Well, so here's what, can I ask for one point of clarification?
Please.
If you're going back and asking for a new proposal from Russell and a new proposal from the other individual, do we want all those proposals before we make a decision?
She got us this proposal within 3 hours, I could tell you.
Sure, but I'm assuming that now we have to wait for 3 people to get back to us, so we're probably not gonna be, well, if you give her the opportunity to come back. So you've got 3 more people that have to respond to us with new proposals, or the option to do that, unfortunately, even though my 2 cents. So that's what it is, until our next meeting. Cricket?
So, as soon as those come in, you could be notified, and you could call special meeting.
Theoretically. But
Or
I
no?
highly doubt that we would have,
Don't look at me, I don't know what we're,
yeah, I highly doubt we'd probably have quorum.
Oh, because we have to have
Wow.
open
The
meeting.
open meeting,
We have to post it.
yeah.
Our next meeting's on the 9th.
No, we need to,
I think this would not be something you'd want to have your minimum number of people attending though,
Sure.
We should all
understand.
be here.
right?
So
It's gonna end up.
it would probably end up being next time.
Yeah.
It's fine for, yeah. All right, any
That
other
works.
discussion?
Something's hanging out here for me, so
Yes.
it comes back to the scope of work, so I think that we're talking about just making sure everybody has apples to apples, which is why we're gonna ask for those revisions. And so Jeremy, since you have the words, you are the apples to apples guy.
Okay,
If
I will
you-
forward you my words or if
well,
do we
Get
have
the emails
access
and
to
you
all
send
of
them.
forward to Marcy so that she can
give it
reach
to
out to
Gavin.
Gavin.
And if you gave it to
And I'll-
Bob, then,
I'll reach out
Okay.
to Steve
Perfect.
and who can reach out?
and Lee.
And Lee.
Done.
Okay, and so we are including for the scope of work and for the purposes of the minutes.
I will forward my questions that I asked Snell and Wilmer
Perfect.
to Marcy and to Bob.
But are we also asking for
And
that
then-
timeline?
Well,
That's
no,
part
we're
of the
asking for
or for-
consultation above and beyond just drafting the,
Which could include.
Yeah. which can include
Yeah,
whatever we
which-
want to ask.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure more questions will come up.
Okay, and if I could just add just a little bit, because I was asked the question, did we get the cart before the horse? I think we're trying to straighten it out where we're getting the
Yeah.
horse first. So that's really good, because our clerk auditor is going to require a written contract.
what?
Our clerk auditor, it does require that we follow the process to have a written contract. The one that's in the packet was recently updated by our county attorney. It is more useful, I agree, for contract kind of work. It's called an independent contractors agreement. We have used it for professional services with attorneys, such as our hearing officer for planning and zoning issues. And the way it gets used is through Exhibit A, which is where you write up the scope of work. And so this is unless our county attorney says a letter of agreement or some other agreement would work better or whatever, this is what the county, the outside legal firm or person would be signing.
So we should probably,
So once
Probably
we voted
send
on
it.
that, we would then forward that
Yeah,
to them.
but my belief is that the county attorney would tell us a letter of engagement with the scope of work in it would be adequate. That's usually how lawyers are engaged. I'm guessing she'd be fine with it. If not, I guess we'd use the long form, which we also use for things like airport runways. And there's got a lot of stuff in there that doesn't apply.
And I'm happy to inquire of her to get some clarity about that. She did have a death in the family, so she's out of state right now.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing none. We have a motion to postpone item M, and it has been seconded. We'll have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. Sid Cricket, favor?
Yeah.
Okay. 6 in favor, Chair Stocks against.
And just on one note, I guess we've agreed to longer meetings.
I thought we already did. I thought we already did.
It was pretty much carte blanche.
Moving to item N, approving amended motion of June 14, 2019 to contract with William Cooper of Bristol, Virginia for expert consultation on election districts in a not to exceed amount of $1,000 for initial draft plans for 3 and 5 voting districts. Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, just what's in your packet in terms of my proposal is no longer accurate because we agreed to strike all the language about any other direction.
It is accurate in the title of the.
Yeah, it's accurate in the
Agenda.
title of the motion. So let me put that back on the table.
Will you
I-
set,
and
will
I
you
just
set the
want to-
stage for everyone that wasn't here last time? Kind of
Yeah,
give everybody an update where we're at.
Yeah, this guy, William Cooper, is an expert on drawing election districts. He's, as most of the people who are experts in this, he's worked mostly in voting rights situations. But he's also worked for committees just exactly like ours. He's drawn up over 750 plans. He said it would be a matter of a couple of hours, since there were no voting rights issues here in Grant County, for him to draw up a couple of plans for us. He also said he'd be in Utah, he expected to be in Utah in September and would be pleased to come down and could actually run live some alternate scenarios for us if we wanted. But it's an opportunity for us to take a look at, the possibilities for districts. One of the things we talked about today is the possibility that the small districts have been problematical in finding candidates. So looking at larger districts or evenly distributed districts would be instructive for us. And this doesn't prejudge whether or not we're going to recommend districts. It just allows us a little more information as we consider that question. And I think September is a fine time for him to do that. We'll be right about the end of our process. Maybe that's the last question we're going to have to deal with. And we could certainly ask him to provide that consultation in terms of in the form of a visit to Moab in September.
Cricket, and
Well, I
then,
think this is exactly the putting the cart before the horse. We haven't decided whether there's going to be districts or not. We're going to spend money when we don't even know for sure it's going that way.
Walt?
Well, at all three open houses, I can promise you that there's a lot of questions about districts and a lot of interest in, not much in all districts, but certainly in some combination of at-large and districts. Their greatest concern was who would do this, and can we be assured that they wouldn't be playing games with it?
Gerrymandering.
And I assured them that this group, and certainly myself personally, would go down fighting nonstop to make sure that this is based on population and not any other playing games. And they said, well, how do you do that? And I said, I don't know technically. We're going to have a census that may be updated in the future, and we will have at least the best numbers we can eventually, but there are people that know how to do this in a way that is based primarily or entirely on population, and you tell them whether you want 3 or 5 or none or whatever it is. And all we were talking about the last time is, could we have that presentation so that we all understood how it would be done, or how it could be done if you were going to look at Grand County and we were interested in any districts. Stephen made the comment that if we got him to actually draw districts on an overlay of Grand County, that people might immediately be saying, oh no, I don't like that district, or whatever it is. So maybe that isn't what we need to do, but using some example of how the technology lets you do this in a way that can reassure people, hopefully in an open meeting, that if we go with districts, there's a way to do this that's objective and nobody's playing games with it, I think is not the cart before the horse. It gives us information to really consider some of this stuff and be able to explain to the people of this county how you would go about doing that in an objective way. To give you an example, I hope all of you have got this latest thing from Morgan County. Theirs is done, and you ought to all get this. This is a nice piece of work.
Must be nice not having any of that diversity, huh?
Well, and they talk about that. They don't have the complexity we do. They have the population, but they did a hell of a job.
They did a good job.
And we ought to do this. But one of the things I don't understand, they're going to go with at-large and districts. And they are moving that district decision to the next county council or county commission to do the districting. That's exactly what people don't want to see, because that just
That's
is
gerrymandering.
that's
Well,
well,
it invites
potentially
it
It
anyway.
invites it. I mean,
it invites
you
gerrymandering.
get a
Gotcha.
politician to try to pick those lines, you know it's, I mean,
Marcy?
I don't want to see us do that, go that route. Period.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way that we can write into the optional plan, if we determine that we want to have districts, that those districts are based on 2020 census data.
We don't know if that'll be available in time.
Yeah, that could,
I think what will actually happen if we decide on districts is we'll get a plan, we'll adopt it. Our initial couple of years will be under that plan, and then when the census data becomes available, the county commission at that time will have to adjust to equalize population.
Or county council.
Or we could specify in our optional plan that that goes back to a citizens group of some kind, I think. We could also, I'll bet, we can
I think
screen,
the
we can
optional
screen
plan-
share. We could probably have his consultation with live messing around anytime we want,
Right.
without him actually coming down here.
And my final comment is, one of the things that Gavin said to me that really has stuck with me is that the optional plan is kind of like the constitution of your form of government. And so
if you're thinking of it in that way, how is the optional plan going to serve the county into the future? With questions like keeping districting safe and not, those are
Yeah.
interesting questions.
If we go with districts, I think we need to deal with that.
The existing districts aren't fair, but I don't think there was any ulterior motive at the time. They just overlaid it on what existed, and that was expedient maybe, but it should have been changed a long time ago.
There are a couple of people who don't agree with you.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to
Staying
argue
on
the
topic,
point.
staying on topic.
So with the, I'm trying to stay on topic because I could go off on, I mean, what I hear from the community, what I hear from a lot of people is fair representation. That's huge. They want to be able to vote for their elected representatives, and most of the people I talk to have leaned towards at large. But with that being said, hiring someone to look at the options of districts is what we're doing. We're not formulating our opinions right now on districts. We're giving us information and knowledge to be able to have an educated decision based on it. And not going to lie, there's some curiosity in me that wouldn't mind seeing some of those out there. Whether I feel
I'm sorry, some of what?
some of those districts, how he would contabulate
yeah.
and how he would divide and how he would do those districts. There's some interesting thoughts there. But with that being said, this is what we're talking about, is the merit of, do we hire somebody to look at optional plans for that? Are we at that point where we need to hire that individual right now?
Or put them under contract.
Or put him on contract. I would definitely say where I differ is I want to be able to ensure that there is the representation that we have on this council or commission in the future is not what we have now. Where as a citizen, I only get a vote for how many individuals? 3 out of 7. So the vast majority of the individuals on the current form of government, and this is one of the biggest issues that I have with our current form of government, is a misrepresentation. That I don't vote for them, yet they still make decisions that affect me. So with that being said, I've never been one to say all in, all out, or anything like that, but any type of districting that is done, if it becomes something where we limit the amount of representation of where your vote, you're only going to be able to vote for 2 out of 5
It's a separate
or
question,
2.
though.
Yeah, those are the things that I have issue with. It's not pertaining to this, but since we're discussing it, and we've had back and forth, and I've kind of bit my tongue on a bunch of discussion items. That's my only issue. Whereas if we do look at districting, I would hope we would not try to tackle that by ourselves, that we would need to hire somebody for that. So putting it on retainer, having that individual, Mr. Cooper, available, not a problem. But I do think we still follow the same suit that we have followed with our attorneys, that we get 2 more bids of individuals who specialize in this field and do that so that we can have some apples to apples. That would be my recommendation at this point, is if we're going to look at this, we look at individuals who are not, and I'm sure Mr. Cooper's top notch, but we also need to take a good hard look at what other individuals are there that we could get a competing bid with.
Bob, then Cricket?
Actually, at this level of spending, we don't need to do that.
According to the county policy, anything below $2,000.
You can just contract. I would like to give Cooper an answer of some kind or other soon, as to whether or not we intend to engage him. I don't think it needs to be anything more than that. And I suppose I could tell him we haven't decided yet. So
Cricket, then Marcy.
Well, I just wondered, I mean, if we're gonna go the way we were going, I agree with Jeremy that we need bids.
Marcy?
It sounds like I'm hearing that our primary interest in Cooper is as education in terms
At
of
this point,
what are the driving mechanisms used currently to create districts that are equitable. And I'm wondering if we can have a video conference presentation from him just about the nuts and bolts of districting and current trends and how those things are put together, just to inform our discussion about districting. That we're not.
point of information, Ruth, can we video conference here?
Yes,
Yes?
that's what this big guy is.
So we could certainly limit our engagement to Cooper just to an educational session. And then if we decide to go ahead with districts, we could do whatever we want to find the person we wanted to do that for us. I don't have a problem with that.
And I think
I'd just like to get some notion of what the possibilities are and how it's done. I mean, I know what at-large looks like. That's easy.
Right.
I think it would be important that he would use data that wouldn't necessarily be Grand County. I like the idea that it's going to be clean. He comes in here with with nothing to do with Grand County, shows us what Chicago, New York, whoever, San Juan,
Or another similar
Sure. And-
community.
and shows what it is.
Tourism related, whatever.
Because that's what my goal is, for no one to have ammunition to say that this process is anything but what it is. It's deciding whether we want at large or districts, not that we want the certain particular end results. That's what I strongly oppose. Looking at, hey, the pink party will get this and the turquoise party will get this. Well,
It wouldn't even be to show whether you want at-large or district. It would be to show that if you were to go with districts, there is a way, using Delaware or whatever as an example up on the board, there's a way you can draw districts with different configurations that are based on, as the Constitution says, the population divided evenly.
I'm curious.
Yep, come up to the microphone so people can hear you. Please state your name. I know.
Kevin Walker,
Andrew, you are,
chairman of the Grand Party.
needs to be on
amongst
the
other
thing.
So I just want to, I think there's some slight misconceptions about drawing districts here. I think in some ways it's less determined and more free than you might think. I mean, we're all familiar with, gerrymandering, where you look at 10,000 possible district configurations, and if you're the party in control, then you pick the one that you think is the best for you. But even if we say we're not going to do that, which he, Will isn't going to have the kind of information to do that, even if he wanted him to. But what he is going to do is he's going to, there's lots of ways, hundreds of thousands of ways you could divide up Grand County into districts with equal population, and you have to decide which of those make sense and which of them don't. And the way that what he's going to ask you is, what are the communities of interest? Like, draw a line around a place like this neighborhood. Do we, Castle Valley, should Castle Valley be split between two districts, or should it all be in one district? And of course, I think the answer is going to be they should all be in the same district. And then what about the Walker-Tusher neighborhood? Do we want a district line cutting that in half, or do you want to try to keep it together? And if you give him those questions, like if you draw circles around neighborhoods or around Murphy Lane or whatever, and say, these people, we think they ought to be in the same district, then he can give you some possibilities. If you don't tell him that, he's going to do something kind of random, and it might make, he'll decide to either divide things with east-west lines or north-south lines. But I guess the main thing I want to say is that some of Walt's comments made me think that, well, based on population, it's just some algorithm we follow when we end up with an answer, and that's not true at all. There's many, many different ways of dividing the people population. And so, I guess the other thing to look at is redistricting commissions in some states don't allow the state legislature to draw districts. They have an independent redistricting commission. Those redistricting commissions are given instructions like, if you're drawing state house districts, don't split up counties into 2 districts unless you really have to, things like that. So you need to have, it's not a hands-off process. You're gonna have to tell them things like, these are areas that we don't want to split, and these are areas we want to keep together. And he'll say, okay, well, I can do that and have equal population if I do this. So.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Walt?
I did. That actually isn't reassuring to me.
Huh?
That actually is not reassuring
No,
to
me
me.
neither.
I understand that entirely. And I understand Kevin, for example, saying Castle Valley ought to be all together. That's a no-brainer to me. And maybe Castle Valley and Thompson and the piece of Green River should or should not be. Those when you start talking about areas of special interest or communities of special interest, you lose me immediately. Who's special interest? And who decides what those areas of special interest are? We do, I understand that, but boy, I think that's exactly why I want this guy to come talk to us about. And Kevin, that's exactly what a lot of these people at these open houses were telling me. He said, I don't trust people to just sit there and play with numbers and try to figure communities.
Bob? Just off the top of my head, there are 3 obvious ways you could split up the county into districts. You could do it as a pie, so each district would have part of downtown. You could do it north-south bands or east-west bands, or you could do it circles. So rural would all be together, central city, tiny at that point, would be all together. But we're the ones who have to make that choice if we go with districts. What we want to know at this point is, what are the possibilities?
Yes.
How the heck do you do it? We're the ones who are charged with coming up with a plan, and we're the ones who have to make sure that they're not slanted in terms of political orientation or party. But you can't, Kevin's absolutely right. We have to, if this guy comes and gives us an educational presentation, we'll see what kinds of questions he'll need us to answer in order to do it. For instance, in my conversations with him, he said, well, do you want me to keep existing office holders in separate districts or to protect them? He said, some places want me to do it, other places say, no, we're not going to tell you where they live, so you're blind to that. But we'll have to answer those kinds of questions. There's no kind of, justice is blind, but redistricting isn't. And the thing that we have to ensure is that it's fair, and that it's obviously fair to everybody. And I think we ought to look at it. I'm curious too.
So I think the motion that needs to be made is that we have Mr. Cooper give us a presentation on an educational presentation on how that's done.
Yep.
And then we become educated, so we know what questions will need to be asked, won't need to be asked.
Yeah, and if we really want to ask them,
Yeah.
i.e. go with districts, or
Yeah.
we don't want to, they're too divisive or unfair, and we don't want to go with districts.
So one other thing that we'll have to be thinking as well will be what if any dividing characteristics we want to identify for him, which is it's a lot more critical of information as well. That would be something that I would like to know from him is, hey, what are the 17 flavors of districting? Yeah. Which unfortunately sounds like gerrymandering, but
Well, it's only gerrymandering if you do it unfairly to give a party an advantage.
Yep. End result.
And as you know, it's become very prevalent. And part of this guy's career has been undoing gerrymanders that were discriminatory in terms of primarily racial groups.
But then they usually set it backward. They set it back.
Well,
they do have that option as well.
Usually a court then approves it, presumably fairly.
Yeah. Walt, Cricket, did either one of you guys? Nope, nothing. All right.
I just think this is worth doing so that we're all on the same page and understand what we need to know.
Well, I'm happy if this group votes to contract with this guy, to ask for services in the nature that we're discussing, either a trip here or a video conference that's generally educational in nature and doesn't get into any of the, doesn't draw lines, but makes us more informed about what we would have to do, the questions we would have to answer in order to district if we chose to do that.
Do we have to agree to $1,000 no matter what?
Well, I think it'll be less, a lot less than that if we do what we're,
Video conference.
yeah, video conferencing, we're probably talking
So it
about
would be less.
$300.
Be less than that, and we'd get the information. It'd certainly be worth it to have the educational experience of it. As long as it wasn't gonna cost $1,000.
Yep.
Small county.
Do we have any motions?
Is there a motion already on the floor?
There's no motion, we're just discussion.
I'll make a motion to have Mr. Cooper come via video conference to educate us on the possibilities of what redistricting would look like for us as a study committee.
Great. Second,
Do we want to put a cost on
not
that?
to exceed $500.
Not to exceed $500.
Okay, so there's a motion before us and a
It'll
second
take 2 hours of prep and 1 hour with us, something like
to
that.
have Mr. Cooper appear before us, a video conference presentation for the study council committee for the mere education purposes with a budget not to exceed $500.
Is it okay if he says, well, I really want to come, I'll do it on my hook for under $500?
If he wants
Okay.
to pitch
Okay.
for $500, you betcha.
He may be in
Could get
Utah
a hotel
already.
room almost
Yeah.
for that much you have right now.
So discussion on the motion?
I gotta guess.
May I ask you to repeat it? I didn't quite, I get it, but I didn't get it down in.
So if I'm stating it correctly, there has been a motion to approve a visit from Mr. Cooper via video conference, or if he appears in person, to give us a presentation regarding districting for education purposes only, with a budget or with an expense or however much he's going to charge us not to exceed $500. If I've repeated it fairly.
Call the question.
No discussion. Discussion closed. All in favor, please raise your hand. 6-4. Any opposed? Cricket green. Any other discussion on item N? Do you think it would be possible to get him? Do you think it'd be possible to get him here next time
I'm sorry.
for the next meeting?
I'll email him tonight.
Let me know so I can get it on the agenda.
Yes, please. All right, moving on to public hearings, possible action items, seeing none. Moving to future considerations. Item O, determining a fall meeting schedule. My understanding is Ruth has asked for calendars. I don't know if she's gotten very many calendars. 0. So we've been all fantastic.
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, so it's really more having it on here, you don't have to figure it all out right now, but having it on here until we can get it, because the thing is, you guys have lives, and if you don't get your lives booked with study committee meetings, you're not gonna have
Yeah.
a full house.
Yes.
So the sooner, the better.
I think it's really nice that Ruth assumes I'm going to be
Yes.
able to know what I'm doing tomorrow. Let alone in the fall, Ruth.
Yeah, you all can use
I
gas.
have a feeling I'm getting up at 5 in the morning
I'm
after my
available.
breakfast guy walked out this morning. That'll be where I'll be. I'll be at the hotel.
Does anybody in the fall have any large trips planned now that they know of?
Halloween time.
Walt, do you know the dates on it
Just a
yet?
couple of weeks. Yeah, I'll get them to.
Okay. So if you can get big, I know everybody's saying, well, if I don't have anything, I'm just not sending anything, and I'm part of the problem. We all are. If there's a big trip, let her know, because otherwise she'll assume that you're available for everybody.
First week of August, my anniversary. That's it.
And are we still looking at Fridays?
Yes, Fridays.
Day trip.
Okay. Hang on, we're almost done, guys. Any other discussion on the scheduling? No.
I think we're good.
No closed session necessary. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
One quick,
Oh, Walt.
I just want to remind you again,
Oh, yeah.
this is worth
You sent
getting.
that to us, right, Ruth?
I did send that to you. Chris Baird made a point that it is not adoptable because it's not in ordinance form. It is a report, but it was hot off the press, so.
It's their process.
It's the
that
kind-
they've gone through, and it's pretty detailed.
Is it the kind of thing that they would then give to an attorney to
Yes,
draft?
I'm sure
Okay.
that's right. Or at least.
Well,
part
I
of
believe the email said that they thought it would pass the muster. And they used their own in-house attorney, their own county attorney.
I know.
I think I understood that right.
Their decision-making and criteria and all is really worth us looking at.
Perfect.
You may not have to adopt it all, but it's worth looking at.
Good. We've got a motion to adjourn by Jeremy Day, second by Cricket. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Opposed.
How about that?
Hey, Ruth?
I just gotta go back to work.
So I am going to email Gavin with
Oh, right.
Jeremy.
So this was my week last week. First off, we have those brownouts down in my area. There was low voltage outages,
Criteria,
and that
questions.
fried my brain. So it's all my
And
3 phase